Jacqui, do you want to test your mic real quick?
Testing 1 2, test 1 2.
Great. I just got the cue. We're live. We're going to let this populate for about 10 seconds, and then we'll get ready to go. Okay, terrific. Storme, you ready to do this?
Yeah.
Everybody? Okay, thank you so much. Hello and welcome to Subpoena Power, a primary debate night for Oklahoma County District Attorney candidates. This is the first of 2 debates we have tonight. We're starting with the 4 Republican candidates seeking the nomination for Oklahoma County District Attorney. After a short break, we'll have another debate between the 2 Democratic candidates seeking the seat. My name is Trace Savage. I'm the editor-in-chief of NonDoc.com. We're an online journalism publication based in central Oklahoma here. I'm on stage tonight with Storme Jones, News 9's new morning anchor. He's going to get in a 15-minute nap between the 2 debates because he's got to be up at 3 a.m. Storme, I'm glad you survived a car wreck. I really am. So
took a little tumble yesterday. We're doing well.
I didn't want to have to run across the stage, and ask your questions as well. We have a lot of other media partners for this event. Thank you so much to UCentral Media, UCO here at the Liberal Arts Building in Edmond. It's a beautiful facility. George, thank you so much for letting us be here. We've got other media partners like Oklahoma Gazette, a bunch of other people I called around today who are streaming this also on their Facebook page. UCentral Media is going to be running a fact check for us, so look for fact checks in the coming days. Exaggerate with caution, so be careful, candidates. Real quick, I think I just read your bit,
Yeah,
Storme.
that's fine. News 9 is also streaming this live on our platforms, our apps, Facebook as well. The NonDoc Facebook, you can watch it live as well.
I'm so sorry, Storme. That was a new bit, and we just messed it up immediately. Okay. Debates take a little bit of money and time to produce, so I want to thank our financial sponsors of NonDoc's 2022 Public Debate Series real quick. The State Chamber of Oklahoma, AARP, the Oklahoma Public Schools Resource Center, the advocacy firm of McSpadden, Milner, and Robinson, Oklahoma Association of Realtors, and Overman Legal Group. Thank you so much for believing in public debates, really. Thank you.
And we do want to ask 2 things of the audience real quick. First, consider sharing one of those streams who are live on News 9's Facebook page right now. Let your neighbors be as informed as you are for being here this evening. And the second, please just silence your phones.
With that, I'll just describe tonight's format. It's pretty simple. We're going to have 90-second opening statements from each candidate. We will then have 3 rounds of questions, and then we will also have 90-second closing statements. We drew straws earlier to determine the order of opening and closing statements. Ms. Jacqui Ford, you drew the first straw. Mr. Kevin Calvey will go second, Mr. Galen Gigger will go third, and Mr. Robert Gray will back clean up for us. So with that, Ms. Ford, 90 seconds to you.
Thank you so much, Trace and Storme, for having us here, and I will echo their sentiment of gratitude of folks who are invested in local politics as well as federal politics. What happens in this race has more day-to-day impact on your lives, the lives of your family and your friends and your neighbors, than perhaps any of the other races that are going on. The district attorney's office is a position of power and honor, and I am honored to be the first woman to ever run for this seat. And I'm really, really excited about the ideas that we have for smart justice to bring to Oklahoma County. The more I'm out in the community speaking to voters and community members and a number of our law enforcement friends and people who are impacted by our criminal justice system, one thing remains the same, that the community is hungry for change. And we need to think about how we can move forward with new, fresh ideas to create safer communities, more integrity-driven and transparent policies in prosecuting, so that we can create a better community for all of us to be in. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm looking forward to continuing to answer tough questions with each of you tonight and through the remainder of this candidacy. And I will be asking for all of your votes on June 28th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can hold our applause till we get to the end of our rounds, that'll help us get through faster. We've got another debate tonight. Commissioner Calvey, 90-second opening statement to you.
Also, thanks to NonDoc, News 9, and all the sponsors, I'd like to recognize my wife and 7 children who are here in the audience. My name is Kevin Calvey. I prosecuted terrorists for the Army. I've obtained several death sentences against some of the most evil people on the face of the planet. The Army recognized my skill as a prosecutor by awarding me the Bronze Star Medal. The first reason I'm running is to repair the broken relationship between the District Attorney's Office and law enforcement. This is caused by some wrongful prosecutions by the District Attorney's Office on some police officers, particularly 5 Oklahoma City police officers who respond to an armed robbery in progress. The armed robber disobeys their orders to keep his hands up and reaches behind his back as if he's going for a weapon. They shot and killed him. It was self-defense. They should have. And I've heard some people say that, well, you can't really tell just from a video what's going on in that case, because it is on video. You've probably seen it on the news. That's nonsense. To file a felony charge that could end a police officer up with life in prison, you better have beyond reasonable doubt to begin with. And that video alone shows reasonable doubt. There's a reason why I'm supported by law enforcement, most notably Sheriff Tommy Johnson. That's the only law enforcement endorsement that's been issued in this race since I announced my candidacy. Going against the police makes us all less safe. We need to support our police, and business as usual just won't cut it at the DA's office anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Calvey. Mr. Gieger, 90 seconds to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Galen Gigger. I am running for district attorney. I have done for 23 years what the other candidates talk about doing. For 23 years, I have been in the courtrooms fighting for victims, and it has been my pleasure, and it's been a great responsibility. Here in Oklahoma, I went to law school. I went to college here in Oklahoma. I've raised my family here in Oklahoma, and this community is important to me. I have dealt with some of the most violent crimes that our county has dealt with. I have obtained death penalty convictions. I've tried over 100 jury trials. I quit counting at that point, and I've been doing this, as I said, for 23 years. The relationship with law enforcement and the Oklahoma County DA's office is not broken. In fact, I'm going to take 15 seconds and ask the law enforcement officers that I asked to come and support, if you guys would stand and get recognized by this audience, I would appreciate that. Thank you for what you do every day. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to stop people from clapping, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for what you do every day. I work day in, day out with these men and women. I staff their cases, and I realize the importance of what they do. The relationship is not broken. The relationship works very effectively. Our conviction record shows that. My personal trial record shows that. And it is very important to have someone with the experience to know when charges should be filed and when charges should not be filed. And hopefully in a few moments I'll have an opportunity to readdress some of those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Last but not least, Mr. Robert Gray. Thank you. 90 seconds.
Good evening. Like you said, my name is Robert Gray. I'm running for district attorney for Oklahoma County. I'd like to thank my wife here. The kids stayed at home. She's here, so they won't be interrupting us. And I'd also like to thank my dad for being here. Thank you to NonDoc and to News 9 for having us out here and giving us this opportunity to speak. You know, we have a lot of issues facing Oklahoma County, and we need to get out in front of those. I believe I'm running because for 3 reasons: leadership, service, and fairness. Also, we need to be out there. We need to work with mental health experts, we need to work on addiction, and we need to back our law enforcement officers. A little bit about me: I'm from Oklahoma. I grew up in Edmond. I went to school here. I actually did some credits here at UCO also. So I'm familiar with the community, I'm familiar with the area, and I know, or I feel like I know, what the citizens of Oklahoma County want. They want a safe community that they can go about their business, send their kids to school, raise their families, and be left alone. And that's what I want for the citizens of Oklahoma County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's give that round of applause. I know you guys were holding it in. There we go. Okay. Let's get right to our first round of questions. The title of this round is Storme Jones on Negotiable Instincts. I think that's funny. Where are the other lawyers here? Okay, no? All right, great.
We got one.
There we go.
Hey, this first question is going to go to Mr. Gieger first, and then we'll work our way down. Where did you go to law school, and what was the most important lessons you learned there?
In law school?
Yes, sir.
I went to law school at Oklahoma City University several years ago. And the most important lesson I think I learned in law school is they teach you how to think. They don't teach you necessarily how to practice law, because I think you go to law school and they teach you the fundamentals, but when you come out, you really don't know what the day-to-day is. They taught you how to apply evidence to the principles of law, and that is what has served me throughout my career as a prosecuting attorney, because, quite frankly, the law should be blind. Our symbolism of our country shows that. Lady Justice has a blindfold on. It should be applied equally no matter who you are. whether you're a citizen, whether or not you're an elected official, whether or not you're a law enforcement officer, whoever you are, whether you're an attorney. And for that matter, I have applied it that way for 23 years, and I can give you specific cases where that has been applied. I'm grateful to the educators at Oklahoma City University. They taught me well, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to practice law here in the state of Oklahoma.
Mrs. Ford, 60 seconds, same question. Where did you go to law school, and what was the most important lesson?
Perfect. I went to the University of Oklahoma. The most important lesson, that's a question I haven't been asked for over 16 years. I think it would be the power of humility and being able to humble ourselves and recognize what our role is in society. As lawyers, we are helpers. Whether you are a criminal defense lawyer, or a prosecutor, or a family law lawyer, or a civil litigation attorney, your job is to help people through some of the most trying times of their life. And one of the things that law school really taught me was being able to perceive the world through a perspective that was not my own, and to see how the law in its application can affect different people, and that justice is rarely a black and white decision. Justice for one person can feel incredibly unjust for another. And so as we apply the constitutional principles that we've all sworn an oath to, we must do them equally and fairly and humbly.
Thank you. Commissioner Calvey, 60 seconds, same question.
Thank you. I'm from Oklahoma City, but I attended Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. And I think the most important lesson I learned there, first of all, was what not to do, because Georgetown's a very liberal school, and they did not have a very good example, in my opinion. But it shocked me into recognizing what really is important. Among other things, I would say a reverence for our U.S. Constitution. I went into law school thinking, like some do, that, anybody who's charged with a crime must be guilty and this sort of thing. But I had a professor there who said something very interesting. He said that having a vigorous criminal defense bar in a community provides a systemic deterrent against overreach or accidents by the police and prosecutors. And that sunk in. I call myself a constitutional conservative, and that means I revere the entire Constitution, and that includes 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments, as well as 2nd, 1st, and 10th. Thank you.
Mr. Gray?
Yes, I graduated from Oklahoma City University in 2007. The most important lesson I learned, and something that bothers me on a daily basis, and something that I would bring to the office of elected, is professionalism. That was something that was ingrained in me early on throughout the education, and something that has gone through all the way through, and something that I strive to do today. That's be professional every day. It's to show up and do whatever job you do to the best of your ability, whether you're sweeping the floor, taking out the trash, an officer, a prosecutor, a defense lawyer, whatever your role in society is, be professional at it, and do the best that you can every day, and show up every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got the second question from Ms. Ford. What are the primary philosophical and obligational differences between working as a prosecutor and working as any other type of attorney?
Well, from a prosecutor standpoint, you do not have a client. Most lawyers, especially in private practice, have a client, and your ethical obligations are to protect that client's interest and to advocate for that specific client. A prosecutor's role is different. Although they are advocates for victims and they are advocates for justice, their role is to serve all of us. And we have these conversations specifically in Oklahoma County. I had it just yesterday with a prosecutor who was struggling with balancing that role and who your obligation is to. And it is a tough balance, because you not only are required to advocate for victims of crimes, but you also must advocate for the truth. And you must be a person who is honestly seeking the truth, even if the truth does not support your position. And that is a different obligation from a number of lawyers.
Wonderful. Commissioner Calvey, same question to you. What is the primary philosophical and obligational difference between a prosecutor and other types of attorneys?
I think Ms. Ford's answer was a good one. I would say, in a sense, of course, the prosecutor's client is the people. And in one sense, But there are restrictions on prosecutors for what they can and cannot do and say in that obligation. I would say the role of the DA is to enforce the law with an emphasis on public safety under our constitutional system of government, as well as other statutory obligations of the district attorney's office. The focus really ought to be on public safety in that matter. The focus, of course, for a defense counsel is going to be, upholding the constitutional, evidentiary, and other rights of their client. And as I alluded to earlier, that's a very important role. And I respect ethical defense attorneys who do so, like Ms. Gray and Mr. Ford. Mr. Gray and Ms. Ford. But I think that for the prosecutor, you need to focus and be the advocate for public safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Same question to you.
Yes, the prosecutor's role is to do the right thing every time. There is no leeway. There's nothing that you cannot give on that. And they must enforce the law as is written. It's not a time for politics. It's not a time to play games. It's a time to do what is right. And what is right is what the law says. Now, for other areas of the law, it varies. I've represented people that have been accused of harboring poisonous snakes. What was our role there? Our role was to defend the client's interests. I've also done civil cases in federal and state court. I've done criminal cases in federal, state, and municipal court. There you have a client. Oftentimes in civil court, you have a client that is a business. So you have to maintain that perspective as you go forward as a lawyer and as an attorney, and know what your role is in the system.
Thank you. As much as I want to know more about the snakes, I'm going to go ahead and move to Mr. Gieger. Same question to you, sir.
The role of the defense bar is an important part of our criminal justice system, and I share my defense lawyer friends here on the podium's opinion of that, because it is essential. The power of the state is significant. But prosecutors have an additional ethical obligation that doesn't apply to any other attorneys. And being a prosecutor, I would know that, because it's an additional ethical responsibility in our ethical code that applies only to prosecutors. And that is that we simply not advocate to win or lose, that we see that justice and fairness be done. That's what, again, I have done for 23 years. In fact, just this morning, there's some defense lawyer acquaintances I have in this court, in this forum, that saw me doing just that, advocating on behalf of a criminal defendant who was facing the death penalty, who I did not feel was getting appropriate representation to the level that the law requires. There's a Supreme Court case called Ake. There are Oklahoma State Court of Criminal Appeals opinions that refer to that, indicating that at that point, I, as the prosecutor, have an ethical obligation to step in and bring those matters to the court. And again, I noticed some head nods. It was a relatively contentious argument, but it's something that I had to do.
Thank you.
It's something I have experience doing.
You've got the whoa sign, so there we go. But thank you very much. It's an important conversation. Storme, you have the next question.
Yeah, I think most everyone mentioned ethics. Speaking of ethics, Commissioner Calvey, you've been endorsed by House Speaker Charles McCall, who did serve as a witness for the recent Oklahoma County grand jury in the indictment of Representative Terry O'Donnell. McCall played a role in advancing the tag agent bills that resulted in O'Donnell's indictment, but so far McCall has not been charged with a crime. What do you know about the pending charges against the former Speaker Pro Tem and his spouse? And if the case does remain active after the election, would you recuse yourself due to the endorsement from the Speaker?
Well, I'm not sure what the Speaker did testify about. The grand jury proceedings, of course, are secret. So I would say the only thing I know about it is what I read in the paper about it. But I will say that, of course, there are several allegations of corruption in state government right now, Swadley, CLO, et cetera. I've stood up to corruption, even stood up to a sitting governor of my own party, Mary Fallin, when there was a big health department scandal and a scandal involving her state finance officer. And I got to cross-examine that person, Preston Dorflinger, at length for a special investigative committee. So, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. If there is a reason to recuse, certainly I would. That's the only right thing to do. But I'm not afraid to stand up to fight corruption, even when it would involve my own party, and I have a track record to prove it.
We do have a question coming up about corruption at the Capitol, but just specifically you said you would recuse yourself if there was a reason to recuse yourself. Is his endorsement of your campaign reason enough?
Legally, it's not. And again, I don't know, what he testified to. In other words, if he was testifying in favor of somebody, that might make a difference.
Okay, Mr. Gray, what do you know about the Terry O'Donnell indictment we've been discussing, and how does a DA know when they should recuse themselves?
Yeah, so as far as Terry O'Donnell goes, Representative Terry O'Donnell, I only know what I've seen in the newspapers. I have talked to some attorneys that know him well, just offhand, because they know I was running for DA, and asked me what I thought. And I said I don't really have an opinion one way or the other because I haven't seen much about it other than what I've read in the papers. As far as when you know to recuse, it's one of those things. We have it in our ethics code, and you'll know. You'll know when the time is right. If you've represented, for instance, in my case, if I'm lucky enough to win this election, people that I've represented, I can't turn around and prosecute them. So there's a good example of when you would need to recuse. If you have a direct connection to the case, if you have a financial interest in the case, there's some examples I can think of.
Thank you. Mr. Gieger, what do you know about the former Speaker Pro Tem's indictment, and when would you recuse yourself in any case?
Yeah, I know very little about the former Speaker's indictment. What I do know is that I have actually prosecuted other state legislators like Randy Terrell and Debbie Leftwich in corruption. I've prosecuted judges, I've prosecuted attorneys. It's interesting, Mr. Calvey sponsored a bill not too long ago that would prohibit a district attorney from indicting a legislator or an elected official on a state level. So I'm curious as to why he would say that he is very opposed to corruption and fighting it when he actually has sponsored legislation to keep district attorneys' offices from doing that. As far as recusing goes, I don't disagree with what Mr. Gray said. If there's an appearance of impropriety or if you do not feel like you can approach it fairly and justly, then you have an ethical obligation to recuse.
Let's get to Ms. Ford about the same question, and then we'll give Commissioner Calvey a chance to respond to that. Go ahead, ma'am.
Sure. Like the other panelists, I know about this situation only by what I've read in the papers. I know that it may or may not pass a sniff test, right? Recusals and ethics mean that you cannot advocate and move forward on something that you have a personal interest in. With regards to whether a district attorney should recuse, clearly the cases that I am representing the accused in a criminal defense case right now in Oklahoma County, I'm going to have to recuse from. I think you can build Chinese walls. I've actually engaged in conversations with some of the prosecutors about how that's going to work out. But certainly an endorsement alone, I do not think gives rise to a need to wholly recuse. I don't think that someone believing in you politically necessarily means that you would fail your oath. I think you have to test your own sense, and if you're wondering if you should recuse, you probably should. And you have to make that determination on a case-by-case basis, and the other lawyers and judges are going to hold us accountable to that as well.
Mr. Calvey, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond to the bill Mr. Gieger was making.
Exceedingly misleading. So what that bill did was it would have said that those cases would be filed by the Attorney General's office, and here's why. At the time that I filed that bill, there was a rogue leftist prosecutor in Travis County, Texas, that's Austin, who was harassing the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, because he didn't have to face the voters statewide. He only had to face the voters in one very liberal county. So it was an abuse of office by a prosecutor there to go against somebody from the other party. I found out after I'd filed the bill that the Attorney General here already has the ability to take over prosecution from a DA, and therefore I dropped the bill once I found that out.
One thing I think is interesting is that the Attorney General's office is, of course, appropriated by the legislature, so sometimes that poses an interesting limit on the Attorney General's maybe, appetite. We have an AG's debate tomorrow night at OCCC, 5:30. Tune into the same stations to watch that. I want to give Mr. Gieger 15 more seconds to respond back to what Mr. Calvey said. Let's get into this a little bit. I'll give you 15 more to close it, Mr. Calvey.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're sponsoring legislation off of some allegations about a DA in Texas, I don't understand it. The fact of the matter is we had prosecuted a very hotly contested matter against a very prominent Republican in the legislature named Randy Terrell and a senator named Debbie Leftwich. I'd also prosecuted, not through the district attorney's office with Mr. Prater, a sitting district judge who had also engaged in corruption. The timing of the bill following very high-profile coverage of those trials, and what it said is that any sitting DA cannot file a criminal charge against an elected official. That's ludicrous.
Mr. Calvey?
Again, it was in response to a situation that was already going on elsewhere. I want to make sure it didn't happen here. And if you want to talk about public corruption, the most corrupt public official in Oklahoma is David Prater.
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute.
You should have ran against him 4 years ago then, Mr. Calvey, not now.
Okay, we have some fact-checking to do for our UCentral Media students. That way you guys are here. I've got the next question of this round for Mr. Gray. One of the strong and controversial powers of America's criminal justice system is civil asset forfeiture, a process by which law enforcement officers and district attorneys can seize private property, such as cash or vehicles, on behalf of the government without charging their suspects with a crime or prosecuting them. To what extent and when would you use, as a district attorney, would you authorize civil asset forfeiture, sir?
Yeah, so I've actually defended several of these, and oftentimes you will get charges with them. The problem I have with it is when officers go in, take money, property, cars, planes, boats, and then no charges are ever filed, no evidence is ever found of a crime, and then we have to litigate that asset forfeiture for years. And that's very frustrating for citizens. So, if elected, my office would take our duty very serious. I'm not saying to dissuade officers from going after individuals and trying to go after their assets, and our office will do that if it is within the statutes and if it is within the law. But we're not going to be going out and using our position as a cash grab or a property grab on behalf of the state.
Mr. Calvey, same question to you. To what extent, when would you, as district attorney, authorize civil asset forfeiture?
I think Mr. Gray covered it pretty well, but I would say that I don't think it should never be used, but I do think it should always be, whenever it is used, should be done with a greater mind perhaps than is there right now with regard to the constitutional rights of the property owner. It seems to me that if it is done as a way of, say, policing for profit, that's not a good incentive to put on society, and we need to police that. So when I would look at these kind of situations, I would try to ensure that people's constitutional rights were being properly respected in that matter. But I do think there are some situations where it may be appropriate.
Thank you. Ms. Ford, 60 seconds to you.
I have a history of opposing the policing for profit mentality around the old way of dealing with civil asset forfeiture. I've spoken to the Senate, I worked alongside legislatures, and we brought case after case after case where individuals were having their property seized. One of the cases that I remember, and it's been years, where a young man had $8.61 taken from him because he had a marijuana roach in the car of his ashtray. Here's the deal. For a civil asset forfeiture to be appropriate, there must be a clear nexus between the asset and the crime. The fact that a criminal has an asset, but it's not necessarily connected to the crime, does not mean the government gets to come in and take that. I think that's a clear violation of their constitutional rights, and I believe that that's why civil asset forfeiture reform has been reined in significantly in the last several years. Criminal enterprises should not profit from their criminal deeds, but prosecutors should not profit if they don't have probable cause to file a charge and to bring criminal charges as well. So I think it's a balancing test that if you're going to say the money is dirty, you better find the deed dirty too.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gieger, same question to you.
My experience is that prosecutors are not profiting. Come and look at the quality of our office and the office furniture that are in it. The law is in place. We follow the law. It's not a hard question. I think Ms. Ford's right. There has to be a nexus, but if there is a nexus, absolutely we should go after it very forcefully and very efficiently, because criminals should not benefit from their criminal acts, not here in the state of Oklahoma, not here in Oklahoma County. At the same time, the law is in place, and the law should be followed, and if that nexus is not there, it shouldn't be done.
So you don't have the constitutional concerns that maybe Commissioner Calvey does?
Well, I don't think we should deprive people of their rights, their constitutional rights to their property interests without due process. But the law is in place to protect that.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's the end of round one. Round of applause for everybody. Thank you. if I'm texting, I'm texting with the audio and video people, I promise. Second round is called the police and the jail. We're going to have 2-minute answers for each question from each candidate, but first we've got a quick show of hands.
On June 28th, the same day that you all will be on the ballot for this race, Oklahoma County voters will be asked to approve or reject $260 million in bonds for construction of a new county jail. Please raise your hand if you are planning on voting yes to that proposition.
I'm going to put it halfway up.
Why?
Why? Because a new building will not fix the jail's problems.
But when you go to the ballot box, what do you think you're leaning toward?
I want to get some more information, to tell you the truth. What I have seen is, do you understand that we're still averaging more than a death a month in the Oklahoma County Jail? Someone died this week committing suicide because they weren't being managed properly and they weren't being watched. That's got to stop. Ms. Ford and I have had conversations where the contraband in the jail is unbelievable. I've had defendants who are facing murder charges who should be watched very, very carefully OD because they're getting illegal drugs inside the jail. It has been mismanaged. The jail trust has not fixed the problems. And so we can build a new building, but until you change the way that people are being managed in that facility, control the illegal activity that's going in that facility, make sure people who need to be watched and protected from themselves are doing that, it's not going to matter how many new jails you build. So a total plan, including that, should be presented to the voters. It's one of the reasons my office has pulled out of the jail trust, because they don't listen to law enforcement. Oklahoma City Police has to pay someone overtime to stay in the jail because patrol officers will bring in arrested defendants to book them in. But it takes the jail so long to administer that book-in process that they had to hire overtime officers to stand there and watch them until the jail takes physical custody to get our patrol officers back on the street. It is mismanaged, and it is a ridiculous exercise of the way it's being run.
Thank you very much. I want to give a minute or more to the other candidates. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll be.
Hey,
I don't need any help, but thanks. Mr. Calvey is on the trust, and I'm very interested in hearing his position on this matter. The opposition to the bond has made their voices so loudly clear and they're echoing what Mr. Gieger is saying right now. And I'm not sure there's ever been a moment in time, Galen, where we agree so strongly on something, and this is it. It really makes me happy. We must rebuild the jail. Period. The end. There's no conversation about it. It has been a nightmare since it went up. It is not safe for the detention officers. It is not safe for the inmates. And it is not safe for the public defenders who spend hours in that building every single day. I know because I have experience in that. I have been trapped in attorney-client rooms where I cannot get help because the button doesn't work. People are dying in their cells because the emergency button doesn't work. Every single one of those pods has a viewing observatory space, and it is never full. We have to find a way to invite and encourage qualified people who care about the role of detaining the accused. And it is a very different process than detaining the convicts. And if we as a community do not do better with that Oklahoma County Jail, then the blood and death of every one of these people lies on our hands. And we have to do something different. But with that money and with the new facility, we have to have a real serious conversation about leadership and how we're going to move forward so that people don't die.
Mr. Calvey, she mentioned your name, that you serve on the jail trust. That is a question. What is your opinion?
Absolutely. First of all, we absolutely need a new jail. And yes, a new jail will help a lot with some of the current issues in the jail. A new jail is better designed. Nobody, and I mean nobody, builds 13-story jails anymore. A new jail will require a lot fewer staff to be able to maintain it, thus freeing up staff to take care of other issues. Contraband occurs in every jail, everywhere, especially fentanyl. That is the new scourge, and we would not be getting a new jail but for the jail trust. Previously, the operators of the jail did not have the confidence of the public. The last time a vote was up, it only got 15% support. This one's polling at 70% plus. It's going to pass, I hope, by a large margin. People didn't trust the former operators of the jail. The violence level in the jail is way down since the trust took over. The problem was that the former sheriff, remember, he got the Black Hole Award from the Oklahoma Press Association, just wasn't releasing the data. There's over 80,000 records of violence in the jail that have never been released to the public. We found this out when a federal judge required the sheriff's office to digitize those records here about a year ago. The current trust has done a fantastic job fixing things in the jail. And for those reasons, but you can't fix 13 stories, we definitely need a new jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Let's, we're, you know, the live stream, there's thousands of people watching at home, so let's just kind of keep it to the folks who are running for office, please. I appreciate it. Mr. Gray, 60 seconds to you.
Yeah, so most people in Oklahoma County in their day-to-day lives, they won't go to the Oklahoma County Jail. They've never been there. They think it's a place that we put people that have been arrested for bad things, horrible things. True. We also have people down there that have committed petty crimes, misdemeanor crimes. They're in that same jail with violent offenders. I think part of our role as a district attorney is to set bonds and hold people in that jail. And whoever's in that jail, the DA's office has a say in whether they can get out or not. I think the DA needs to be very smart on who that they're recommending stay behind bars, violent criminals, I would suggest, and who they should let out. I think they should take the record of the offender into account before making recommendations for bonds that are so high that somebody cannot make and get out of there alive. I would say also that mental health support is huge, and we need to be screening individuals that enter the county jail for mental health issues. Are we a mental health warehouse, or are we a county jail? Do we need a new county jail? Absolutely. If you don't believe me, go down there. I was there last week. Walk those floors. Go in the stairwells and see what it's like.
Thank you very much. We have the next question from Ms. Ford. As Storme, you start to ask that, I'm going to adjust your microphone, Ms. Ford. Stay where you are.
Okay. On average, folks in the Oklahoma County Jail remain there at least 100 days. Some say the DA's office needs to clear its caseload more quickly to help keep the jail population down. Ms. Ford, you are a criminal defense attorney running to be a prosecutor. How does a DA enforce the law and protect the public but also limit incarceration levels?
Listen, these are some of the conversations I've been having for the duration of my campaign. The district attorney's office, although they have the vast power of the state, at the end of the day have limited resources, and we have to refocus where we're spending that money. We must file charges on people faster. Every law enforcement officer that I have spoken to, when I ask if you had to get your cases to them sooner, would you do it? The answer is yes. My understanding is the filing pool is incredibly understaffed. So the law enforcement brings their charges, and it can be months before people are charged, and some of these folks are accused of incredibly violent crimes. Victims aren't getting justice, the defendants are in some sort of limbo, and the dockets get clogged up. Right now, they're doing double dockets on arraignments. We only have 6 district court judges, so we have to focus our resources and our priorities on the people that we are most afraid of, not the people that we're most mad at. The second thing that we're going to do differently is we're going to have a district attorney at arraignments. In Oklahoma County, well, I'm not going to put a number on it. Every inmate is arraigned via video with one specific judge. The out-of-custody arraignments, the district attorney's office is not present. They're not having a meaningful conversation about the crime, about the evidence that they have about this individual. So some of our most dangerous offenders are being released without having an advocate from the state of Oklahoma. On the other side, we are also detaining people for long periods of time on incredibly high bonds who have specific case and individual things about them and characteristics that do not require them to be detained on a high bond. We cannot keep people in a jail in which people are dying monthly because they are poor. And a huge number of the individuals at the county jail are poor, and they can't post a $200 bond. The first time they're going to see their public defender is 30 to 45 days. By the time they get to a judge, they've pretty much paid their due to society. So we have to focus where our energies and efforts are and prioritize it from the role of the district attorney to lessen the pressure valve on that jail and to clean up the dockets.
Commissioner Calvey, same question, 2 minutes.
So, excellent answer from Ms. Ford with regard to making sure cases get filed more quickly. That is, charges filed. That is very key to processing those cases. We need to prioritize, as a district attorney's office, those cases where the person is in custody. I realize it doesn't come out of the district attorney's budget when somebody languishes in jail longer than they ought to, given the procedure there, but it does come out of the taxpayers' wallets, and we need to be conscious of that, and we need a district attorney who recognizes and works well with others, not just their own office. The jail should be for public safety, not a debtor's prison. Right now, most of the people in that jail are there because they have been deemed dangerous, and they need to be in jail. However, there's still a significant number of people being sent to jail for doing nothing other than missing court on a cost docket. Now, I'm going to sound like a bleeding heart liberal here for a second, but bear with me. Liberals and conservatives should agree with this. Right now, if somebody's convicted, they have fines and fees assessed to them. Some say they're excessive. That may well be. But if they're required to come back to court, sometimes monthly, in order to explain why they haven't paid their fines and fees, it's because they're poor. And the problem is, if, number one, good luck trying to explain to your boss why you have to take a half day off work every month to go down to the courthouse for that. Number two, stuff happens in life. One of those times, something's going to happen. Sick kid and you can't get child care. Flat tire, your ride doesn't show up. Or, let's face it, many of these people aren't the sharpest pencils in the box and they might miss court because they forget. But that's a lousy reason to put somebody in jail. What we need to do is not make the system reliant on fines and fees. We need to lobby the legislature to fully fund the judges, DAs, and public defenders. And to the extent we are still collecting fines and fees for legitimate reasons, for instance, like restitution to victims, we need to use civil debt collection methods like tax intercepts. That's a much more efficient way of doing it. It's much more humane. We're actually costing more to the taxpayers to jail these people than we are collecting in the fees, and that's wrong.
Mr. Gray, how does the DA enforce the law and protect the public but limit incarceration numbers?
You know, I think it's identification of who the defendant is and what we need to do with them. Are they a violent offender or are they a nonviolent offender? Do they have a history or do they not have a history? What have they been doing? What have they been up to? What are their goals? Where are they going? You know, a lot of that falls on their defense lawyer to inform the prosecutors what they're doing. But it also falls on the prosecutors to remember that public safety is our number one priority. And with that, we have to identify individuals that may have an addiction, individuals that may have a mental health issue, and get them the help and support that they need. Again, as Ms. Ford said, there's people that we are scared of. Yes, they need to be in jail. There's people that we're mad at. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the case. So with that, you have to, it's a delicate balancing act, and I agree. But I also want to reiterate one thing. The charge pool is a problem. There is too many people, and there's a human element to this, every time someone is arrested and every time someone is charged. And when people are awaiting charges, whether in custody or out of custody, it is interrupting their lives. And that has to be changed. I don't know how many people have complained to me about that, but if I had $1 for every single one, I wouldn't be standing up here running for office. So that's something that needs to be done, something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed day one.
Mr. Gieger, 2 minutes, same question.
Repeat the question so to make sure I
Yeah,
understand.
it's how does a district attorney enforce the law and protect the public while also limiting the incarceration numbers?
I'm not sure that the job of the district attorney is per se to limit incarceration numbers, but in regards to some of the things that my opponents have said, they take a rather simplistic view of it because when someone is arrested, the way you don't get incarcerated is don't break the law and don't get arrested. But once you are arrested, certain things have to happen before the DA even has those charges. For example, the arresting officer has to make reports. Those reports have to be given to supervisors. Supervisors have to approve them. If it requires further investigation, it then needs to be assigned to a detective who may have 20 or 30 new cases on their desk that morning. They then need to prioritize how they're going to further investigate those crimes to find out whether there is enough evidence for us to make a charging decision. Once that is brought to us, and that can take days sometimes, maybe even longer than that, Then the DA has to review it and meet with those detectives to make a filing decision that is ethically supported by the evidence and the law. Then a charge pool gets it. Now let me say this. I deal with some of the most violent and some of the most disturbing cases on a daily basis. It's the division, the DA's office that I supervise, the sex crimes and the child abuse division. Those charges are filed timely within 10 days. The law in the Oklahoma County has a procedure to allow for an extension of 10 more days for good cause shown. I would challenge you to find any case that I have worked on within the last foreseeable future where that was not made. I'm unaware of cases like Ms. Ford said where violent offenders are simply just released because charges don't get filed by the DA's office. I take exception to that. That's not the case.
Thank you very much. Mr. Calvey, I've got the next question to you. Since 2020, current District Attorney David Prater has filed charges against at least 7 Oklahoma County Jail employees for allegations that include falsifying records related to suicide, smuggling in contraband, assault and battery, and cruelty to prisoners who were handcuffed to a wall and forced to listen to Baby Shark on repeat. You've been very critical of Mr. Prater for charging police officers with crimes. But what about county jail employees? You serve on the jail trust, as we've discussed, so what's been your analysis of the charges brought against the jail staff in the cases that I just named?
To be very clear, the large majority of those cases, at least, were filed against the former operators of the jail, not the jail trust employees. The problem, the difference, there is a difference between having somebody in custody and mistreating them and a police officer who has to make a decision in a life or death situation within a very compressed time frame, just seconds. In those kinds of situations, I do think we need to support our police. With regard to jail staff, we have some excellent, very hardworking jail staff. They deserve a new jail too. But if one of those abuses somebody who is already in their custody, that obviously has to be treated as a serious matter. Even criminal defendants have a due process rights and rights not to be abused. So in those instances, I do think that some of those prosecutions at least were appropriate, and I do think that we need to make sure that the rights of all are upheld, including those who are inmates in the jail.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray, same question to you. What is your analysis of the charges brought against jail staff, and how do you view the obligation of the DA's office to oversee jail administrators?
Oh, absolutely. The district attorney's office has a duty to enforce the law, and if the staff of the jail does not want to follow the law, then they'll be prosecuted just like the people that they're supposed to be watching over. It's something that has to be done and must be done to maintain order within the Oklahoma County Jail. It saddens me that you go down there and you meet some wonderful people that work at that jail, and it's a very difficult job, just as much as policing is also. But corrections is a difficult job, and they have the task of getting up every day, going down to a jail, and watching people that are charged with crimes that, frankly, you wouldn't talk about with your kids in your living room. And they do that day in and day out, and there's several good ones. So with that being said, yes, you have to prosecute the ones that are causing problems to maintain order there. But I will reiterate that those people deserve a nice workplace too, and a safe workplace, and the current situation is not that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gieger, the next question is for you. Oh, we wanted to silence those cell phones, if I recall right. Okay, there we go, great. I feel like that might have been a law enforcement officer who has to take that call legally, so maybe I'm wrong. Mr. Gieger, same question to you about prosecuting folks who work in the county jail.
We've talked about the jail, and I've given some strong opinions about the jail. On the evening that OCPD had to respond to the jail due to a hostage situation because of mismanagement in the jail, my understanding is there were 4 jail employees working in 13 floors. Mr. Calvey went on the radio on March 11th, 2019 and said guards are beating inmates to death and leaving them to die on the floor naked. That's significantly different than the way he's characterized the situation in the jail right now. The short answer to your question is where I began my opening statements, and that is if individuals who are placed in a position of authority over others violate the law and break the law, they should be held accountable. But it has to be done based on evidence and the law, and they must be treated fairly given the situation that they're dealing with.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ford, same question to you.
I don't even understand why there would be any controversy around prosecuting members of the jail staff who are committing crimes. Not only is it a position of power, it is a position of extraordinary trust. Folks who are incarcerated are deprived of their rights to have a phone to call for help, to defend themselves. They can't go get their own food. They can't get their own medicine. So we have to rely on the folks who are observing and taking care of them, and we must be able to trust that they're doing it in their best interest. The number of cases of folks dying that we are blaming a fentanyl overdose, how is the fentanyl getting into the jail? Because I know my clients are searched, cavity searched if they're arrested at the jail or at the courthouse, and then they're searched again when they get there. We have to focus on how the drugs and the contraband are getting into the jail. And if it's not coming in through the inmates, then it's coming in through the employees. And what are we going to do? And how do they balance whether or not an employee has to go through being searched? Well, we have to do better at screening and hiring and training. I don't see any reason why an employee of the jail doesn't go through a metal detector, who isn't subjected to drug testing. And if they're suspected of bringing drugs into the jail, why are they not being searched? Who is in charge over there that is allowing people to die repeatedly of fentanyl overdoses? And this has to be something that we focus on. So is it the employees? Do they need to be prosecuted? Yes. And if it continues to be a culture that goes unchecked, then their bosses are going to have to be prosecuted as well. Because the lives of the Oklahoma County Jail inmates matter. Whether they're guilty of their crime or not, they have not been sent there to die. And if you are violating their rights and committing crimes as an employee of the jail, you better be expected to be prosecuted by me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Calvey, you were named in Mr. Gieger's answer, 15 seconds, that radio quote. I've heard it bandied about before.
Well, we've had several lawsuits against the county for things involved in the jail. It's actually a lot worse than has ever come out in public. As I said, the former sheriff was not at all transparent. The current jail trust is transparent, and that is why you hear some more things now than you may have in the past. But there were situations in which inmates were abused. There were cases in which, in some cases, there were prosecutions of jail staff. And I will point out that that is the small minority of people who work in that jail or have worked in that jail. None of those people are currently still with the sheriff's office that we were referring to there, but there was some inmate abuse. And as far as I know, those people were prosecuted, and they're not any longer at the jail or the sheriff's office.
15 seconds, Mr.
Sure. It's the reason that sheriff's deputies have endorsed me and their FOP has endorsed me, because you go on the radio and you say things like, your guards are beating inmates to death and leaving them to die on the floor naked, when it is not true. A district attorney cannot say things that are not true, that inflame the public, impugn the reputation of jail employees and deputies in this county, and it's just flat irresponsible. And now to walk it back and say, well, there were some really bad things going on, and so that's why I said it. It's not the mentality nor the responsibility nor anyone you would want running the office that has the power of the district attorney's office to say things like that and then not own up to it when asked about it.
Mr. Calvey, a final 15 seconds.
Seen the lawsuits and the prosecutions. There were mistreatment of inmates at one time, and that's what I was referring to. There are situations, they're very rare, they're very unfortunate. The only law enforcement endorsement that's been made since I got in this race is the sheriff.
And you and your wife gave him thousands of dollars in his campaign.
That's why he has endorsed me.
Thousands of dollars.
That's why I'm endorsed by former prosecutors. Are we going to allow somebody just to talk over me?
I'm sorry, you do not want the facts
to come out,
Mr. Calvey?
Okay, I'm endorsed
Let's just
by
talk about the facts. Did you and your wife give him thousands of dollars? You did, didn't you? Almost $6,000 together you gave me.
If you're impugning the character of Sheriff Johnson, good luck with that,
I'm just saying
buddy.
The truth.
It is the truth that he has endorsed me.
Next question. Let's move on, guys.
Thank you, Storme.
This first question, Mr. Gray, you'll have the first crack at this, and we'll rotate through. We know some of the most high-profile cases that any district attorney must handle involve allegations of police using excessive force. Some of these cases involve the death of citizens. As District Attorney, Mr. Prater has prosecuted and convicted several police officers, which has put him at odds with the local police unions. Police officers do have a difficult job and must make split-second decisions, but when they are wrong and make mistakes, people can die. What would be your philosophy when reviewing such cases for potential charges, and what are your standards for police accountability? 2 minutes to Mr. Gray first.
I'd like to start by saying that I want to thank the men and women of law enforcement. They have a very difficult job. They drive at times of the night that I won't get out, and they drive on streets of this community that I won't drive on. And so I want to thank them for doing that job. As far as prosecuting officers, it's a tough and weighty decision that should not be taken lightly. It shouldn't be taken lightly by any prosecutor that looks at it anywhere. What you're looking for is you're looking for the law, and did they follow the law or did they not? Did they follow their training, their policy, their procedures? Did they do what they were trained to do? And if a law enforcement officer is out on the street by themselves, it's 2 in the morning, and they have a car pulled over, the windows are dark, and they don't know how many people are in there, should they be thinking about who the district attorney is when it's time to act? No. No, they should not. They should be thinking about, what am I trained to do? What are my policies and procedures? And act accordingly. That way, at the end of the day, they can go home to their families. And that's what's most important. That's what's most important to me as a citizen now and as an elected official also, as the elected district attorney. Those men and women of law enforcement have a difficult, difficult job, and it should not be taken. In this culture that we're in currently, it's not a popular job. We have to remember that they have their job to do, just as the prosecutor has their job within the system, just as the defense lawyer has within the system. So I would say, if they violated the law, they violated the procedures, and they violated policy, then yes, we would have to prosecute them, unfortunately.
Thank you. Mr. Gieger, 2 minutes, same question.
Repeat. I want to make sure I answer your question. Repeat it.
What would your philosophy be when reviewing such cases concerning law enforcement, potential charges, and what are your standards for police accountability?
Sure. I don't disagree a whole lot with what Mr. Gray just said. You have to look at the law that is applicable given the situation, because different law enforcement interactions, there's different laws that are applicable. You have to look at the totality of the circumstances. What you can't do is look at one video and make charging or filing decisions, as I've heard represented from this stage. You have to look at the interviews that were conducted after some type of a use of force was made as to the reasons why officers did it. We now have body cams, and I'm grateful that we do, because you have different angles of body cams that might be at play that you need to look at so that you're not relying on one video but on many videos. You need to find out exactly what transpired before and led up to that. You need to understand if the officers had had prior contacts with the individuals that they're dealing with. There's a multitude of questions that go into making charges and filing decisions like that. With that being said, I work closely with law enforcement and detectives every day. I teach law enforcement on how to go about their job, how to do investigations, how to present evidence, and how to interact with the DA's office. We have an ongoing working relationship that's very, very good. Every FOP that is endorsing someone in this race has endorsed me. There's 8 of them. Every law enforcement agency on the east side of Oklahoma County has endorsed me. It's because of the relationships that I have with them that I've built over 23 years, and the way that they know that I screen and look at their cases, whether it involves cases against citizens or whether it involves cases against use of force. I have tried and I have prosecuted officers who have used use of force. Randy Harrison was a Dell City police officer that Mr. Prater and I tried together. And there was some criticism and there were some objections about what we did, but the jury convicted him because the jury followed the path we led them to, and that is based on the law and the evidence. Was this a proper or an improper shooting whenever that officer took the life of a young minority? I continue to do the same thing as DA if I'm elected.
Ms. Ford, 2 minutes, same question.
My experience with law enforcement is different than a lot of the candidates up here. One, I'm the granddaughter of an Oklahoma City police officer. I've had the privilege to also teach Oklahoma City police officers at the OSU Training Academy. I've represented Oklahoma City police officers and officers from other agencies. I've given them advice when they haven't been charged. We've talked about how to do better when there are things going on in their careers that maybe they need some guidance and help on, and trying to honor their confidentiality here, counsel them on how to be the best officers that they can be. I've also had the privilege to hold some of them accountable. When their work and their investigations fail to meet a level of standards and expectations that are expected from the Oklahoma City Police Department and expected from our communities. Some of the finest officers in Oklahoma City have come up to me after trials and said, I learned more being cross-examined by you than I learned in years at the academy. When prosecutors are looking at whether or not to prosecute law enforcement, I think they have to look at the whole person. I expect that if I'm being looked at and being prosecuted for a crime that's outside of anything remotely aligned with my character, that the prosecuting person would look at that. I think we should do that with most individuals, but specifically with law enforcement. We want to look at the whole person. What is their history? What does their disciplinary action look like? Have they jumped agency to agency? Is there a reason for that? And my conversations with the Oklahoma City FOP, who have not endorsed anyone on this stage yet, have included having conversations about how to train law enforcement officers to meet the community's changing expectations and demands of how they're going to enforce laws and deal with the mentally ill. The police are hungry for a leader in the district attorney's office who's going to help them be better and not face being charged. And I think that we can build that bridge and we can work together. My experience as an educator of lawyers and college students and law enforcement officers is going to help us do just that. We'll have a police accountability unit where law enforcement is sitting at the table and they get to talk about the officer that we're looking at. We're going to be mindful and we're going to treat them with the same dignity and respect I would expect anyone on this stage would want to be treated with when prosecuted.
Mr. Calvey, 2 minutes on your philosophy on prosecuting police officers.
Sure, I addressed this in my opening statement as well, but basically when police officers are in a compressed time frame when they're under threat, it is wrong and it is dangerous to second guess them and armchair quarterback a prosecution that could threaten them with life in prison for a decision they have to make in seconds. Obviously not everything every law enforcement officer does is right. There are cases that do need to be prosecuted. But when you're in those kind of situations, like the 5 Oklahoma City police officers we're faced with, they do not need to be prosecuted. They need to be supported. We need to support our police, not persecute them. We don't need a woke, George Soros-funded DA. We need to have somebody who's going to go in there and stand up for law enforcement. That is why the only law enforcement endorsement that's been issued since I got in the race is Sheriff Johnson. That's why he's supporting me. Why don't you ask him? And then that way we'll find out that it is because I do stand up for our law enforcement. I worked with law enforcement, military and civilian law enforcement every day when I served with the Army. And I know that you have to have that close cooperation. That's not there right now between the leadership in the DA's office and the leadership of the Oklahoma City Police, and we need to make that better. The other thing we need to do is avoid gotcha game prosecutions like this one against the 5 cops. Let me tell you about another gotcha game prosecution. There's a young African-American combat veteran named LaRue Bratcher that is being wrongfully prosecuted right now by David Prater and Galen Gigger. He shot a guy trying to rob his business. He called the police. They responded, told him he didn't do anything wrong with that. They did find out that his business license, a marijuana grow business, had lapsed, so they took him down just to arrest him for that. He bonded out right away. But when the DA's office got a hold of it, they prosecuted him for murder, and Galen Gigger personally increased that charge to first-degree murder. That's wrong. It's a wrongful prosecution, and I wrote the state's stand your ground self-defense law, and we need to make sure that we stand up for the rights of all people in self-defense, especially somebody who is a combat veteran and deserves better than what he's getting from the DA's office.
Mr. Gieger, 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I have to be careful how I respond because it's an ongoing investigation. I did not personally make the charging decision in that case. Mr. Calvey's incorrect, but he's been incorrect about a lot of things. But the point of the case is this, he is not entitled to self-defense under the law that Mr. Calvey authored. It was actually copied pretty much from a law that already existed in the state of Florida. But what that law says is if you are engaged in an illegal activity at the time, you're not entitled to assert the stand your ground. He was operating an illegal marijuana grow. He owed thousands of dollars and needed in compliance to bring it up to where he could have been licensed. So that law, the way it was authored and the way it should be enforced, is not applicable to him. The other side of that is I think the evidence will show that, number one, he was standing behind a steel door that he was not going to be able to get into, and it wasn't a warning shot, as Mr. Calvey has said in other speeches that I've heard him give. He was on a monitor, and he could see exactly where this young man was standing, and he drew down and he aimed intentionally and fired.
In keeping with how we've done this, we'll give Mr. Calvey 15 seconds and then 15 and move on.
That's a lie. He did fire a
Go
warning
to
shot.
the
You can
jury
see it
trial
on the
and watch
video.
what happens.
let
You
him
don't know
have-
the
Got to
evidence.
gain
Let's let him have
prosecution,
15
just like the prosecution against those 5 officers, and Galen Gigger is responsible for upping that to first-degree murder. That's gun control, effectively, folks. That's against the right of self-defense, and we need to stand up for the right of self-defense for all people, black, white, no matter what your religion is. And this young man is not a threat to anybody, and he deserves
He is to
not
the guy
be
he
in
shot and
prison.
killed.
Mr. Gieger, 15 seconds and then we're moving on.
Everything he just said is not right. It's just not true. And he doesn't know the evidence. He doesn't know the case. And he is making statements for political favor, and that's what he's done throughout this. That's why he doesn't know the case about the 5 officers that shot. He doesn't know the evidence. He knows what News 9 showed. And he's standing up saying, I'm going to dismiss cases based on what I see on News 9. Well, God help us all if the district attorney makes decisions based upon what
God
News
help us
9
all if you wrongfully prosecute police officers and a young combat veteran.
All righty, Trace.
I've got a question for Mr. Gieger. There we go. Okay.
Great.
You have worked under David Prater for several years, and many folks wonder how similar or different you would be if elected. Prater is a former police officer, and at least in my estimation, he sometimes seems to use criminal charges or the threat of criminal charges to stop behavior he considers improper. Beyond convicting police officers, Prater has also charged numerous public officials with campaign and corruption crimes because the Oklahoma County DA has jurisdiction over any state government matter that occurs here in the capital city. How much time should the Oklahoma County District Attorney devote to investigating and prosecuting alleged corruption in the state of Oklahoma?
Well, in the Oklahoma County, I think is where our jurisdiction lies.
Well, but people file their taxes here. People, send an email from here. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what the DA is charged with, and that is to enforce the laws that are applicable within Oklahoma County. There are other agencies that have concurrent jurisdiction. You've referenced the Attorney General's office. You might ask the Attorney Generals who are running as to how they want to be involved in those types of things, because they certainly have that jurisdiction as well. But when other law enforcement agencies will not step up and fulfill their obligations, even though another agency may have statewide jurisdiction and it seems that that's the appropriate agency to do it, then I think it's incumbent upon the district attorney to do the same thing I've said he needs to do in every case, and that is look at the evidence that's available and apply it to the law, and if in fact a crime has been committed that should be prosecuted, that is what the responsibility of the district attorney is. I have been involved in a lot of the cases I think that you made reference to, at least the ones that were successful. And in fact, every public corruption crime that I have been involved in resulted in either a plea eventually based on the evidence or a guilty verdict based on the jury trial that I did.
I appreciate it. Ms. Ford, 2 minutes to you, same question.
Give me the question one more time, Mr. Savage.
How much time should the Oklahoma County District Attorney's office devote to investigating and prosecuting alleged corruption in the state?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer on a time basis based upon the question, but I think the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office has an absolute obligation to root out and prosecute political corruption. We are watching right now as a number of cases of alleged political corruption are happening. When we are stealing taxpayer dollars to our own financial benefit, and violating our ethical codes and obligations to those we're called to serve, either as a representative or appointed official, that's some good old boy cronyism, and it's 2020. We're done with it. We have to start prosecuting these folks, and if their jurisdiction is appropriate in Oklahoma County, I intend to prosecute them. I don't know how to answer your time question, Mr. Savage, so I want to be honorable about that, but as much time and energy as is necessary to protect the Oklahoma County citizens and the taxpayers who are trusting these folks to do the right thing.
Well, to quote Easy Rider, I'm hip about time. Mr. Calvey, 2 minutes to you.
As I mentioned earlier, yes, there are some allegations of public corruption out there that do need to be investigated, and I have a record of standing up to even sitting governor of my own party, Mary Fallon, when there was corruption in her administration. But let's talk about the corruption in the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office right now. David Prater is the most corrupt public official in Oklahoma. He abuses his office and threatens people with prison for simply disagreeing with them on things. This prosecution against these 5 officers is one example. What he did to the Pardon and Parole Board. Look, I'm glad that Julius Jones was still kept in prison, but when a man's life is at stake and you're up for a death penalty conviction, part of the process is the Pardon and Parole Board. Obviously, I support the death penalty. I've gotten people sentenced to death. But right before they're supposed to rule on clemency, you file a grand jury against them, a grand jury that, by the way, gets no indictments. How humiliating to the DA's office, Mr. Prater, that they couldn't even get a single indictment. You can indict a ham sandwich with a grand jury, but they couldn't indict anybody at the Pardon and Parole Board. That was a gotcha game thing again. How about the refusal to file charges against things like former State Representative Cruz, who allegedly sexually assaulted a woman in her own home? And yet the DA's office announced, what was it, last week, that they're not going to file charges? They said that the victim is not cooperating. She says she is cooperating. I trust her, not the DA's office on this. How about initially refusing to file charges referred by the Oklahoma City Police regarding an assaulting student at Mount St. Mary's? Eventually, after the heat came too high in the media, they filed charges. And by the way, aren't these sex crimes? Isn't that Mr. Gieger? That's your division at the DA's office. So we need to do a better job filing these kind of charges. How many women, how many girls could have prevented being raped or sexually assaulted if you had agreed to file those charges initially? And let's talk about the problems in corruption in the DA's office, the Judge Henderson case. Judge Henderson is Prater's former law partner. Is he telling the truth, or is the employees at the DA's office telling the truth about that? Either way, Prater needs to recuse on that. He should not be handling that case.
I believe he has recused. 2 minutes to Mr. Gray. We'll fact check that, though.
He has.
Yes, the role of the Oklahoma County District Attorney and any district attorney is not to play political games. It's not to take a political football and throw it around. And that's oftentimes what you see. And if I'm elected DA, that's not something that I want to participate in, not something I want to be known for. I want to be known for doing the right thing when it may not necessarily be the popular thing, but we'll always do the right thing. How much time should we devote to public corruption? As much time as necessary. If we're aware that there are crimes being committed, if we're aware that there is public corruption within our county, within our jurisdiction, we have a duty to our taxpayers who pay our salary to investigate those crimes. And if there's a crime there, to prosecute those that are responsible. It's not something that we can turn our head the other way because they're either in our party, not in our party, said something about us on the news we didn't like, said something at a party that we didn't like. That's not what this game is about, because it's not a game. Like I said earlier, there is a human element to all of this, and oftentimes that is lost. Public officials go through a lot to get to where they are. They go through a lot to run for office, and once they're there, we put our trust in them to make decisions that we think are best for us as citizens. If they're engaged in public corruption, that trust is broken. So yes, as the Oklahoma County District Attorney, we must root out public corruption wherever it exists. But not only that, but corruption as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have 15
love-
seconds to?
I would
Okay,
love
we're
to.
running late, but I do feel
Well,
like questions about sex crimes are
When
relevant.
you make your statements as DA based on what's in the news, you make mistakes. The grand jury returned a scathing report, and I would encourage the public to read that and not listen to Mr. Calvey about the Pardon and Parole Board. Mount St. Mary's involves juveniles, and I'm not going to comment on that, but I would assure you, Mr. Calvey, that those cases were investigated and the appropriate action is taken, and in fact, the investigator who worked on that case.
Too bad more
sitting
women
right
got
back there.
sexually assaulted and raped because you dilly-dallied.
The investigation as to Senator Cruz, the investigator who knows the victim is uncooperative, is sitting right back there. If you want to talk to him, he can tell you about it. His name's Scott Blankenship. And there is an ongoing investigation, and a grand jury, as I understand it, has been summoned in regards to the allegations against former Judge Henderson, and Mr. Prater has recused, and that's common knowledge as well.
10 seconds, Mr. Calvey, anything?
Well, there again, decisions on not prosecuting sex assault crime is a big problem.
They haven't, listen to what I'm saying, they've been filed.
They need to get, no, you didn't file them, you still haven't filed on some of these. And maybe it hits a little too close to home with you about not filing sexual assault charges, but we really don't need a DA who ignores those things.
Thank you very much. Okay, end of round two, round of applause. We're going to go to 90-second answers in this round. These questions are only for the individual candidates that we ask them to. First, a quick show of hands. Storme, we've talked about, I'll just ask it. We've talked about a lot of important issues tonight. We've got the Democrats coming in about a 10-minute break after we finish this. Raise your hand if you would be willing to commit to debating your Democratic opponent for the general election. Oh, sure. All four of them. Great. We'll be here. We'll see you then. Okay. Storme, you've got the first question this final round to Mr. Calvey.
Yeah, this question, 90 seconds only to Mr. Calvey. Commissioner, at the Fraternal Order of Police Forum in November, you said, quote, "There are occasions I've exaggerated about something in order to make a political point." As the only candidate here who could be remotely described as a career politician, someone who's once threatened to set himself on fire on the House floor, how would you respond to voters who fear you will play politics with the power of the DA's office? 90 seconds.
Sure. So first of all, being a legislator and drawing attention to issues is very different than administrative role like I have at the county now, like I had prosecuting for the Army, and as a DA, where I did not do those things. So the famous novelist Flannery O'Connor said, "To the hard of hearing you shout, and to the almost blind you draw large and startling pictures." The state Supreme Court was in a habit of illegally striking down enactments by the legislature by deliberately misinterpreting federal jurisprudence on those matters, particularly with regard to laws to protect unborn children. And in order to draw attention to that, I waited until there was a bill up that would have provided a pay raise for the state Supreme Court. And I said that if I wasn't a Christian, to protest this, it would be appropriate, or I'd be tempted to set myself on fire. I suppose today, if I were to do it, I would say, to protest this, I'll climb the Devon Tower. That's probably what I'd do now. But fortunately, it did draw attention to that issue. And I'm happy to report that the state Supreme Court, it kind of spooked the Judicial Nominee Commission appointing at least one person who was conservative in each round. And the state Supreme Court now has a majority of people who do rule in favor of those laws. So sometimes drawing attention to an issue using political theater can be appropriate for a legislator, but that's not what I'll do as a district attorney.
So just to be clear, what would you say to folks who are worried that you would play politics in the DA's office? 15 seconds, quickly.
Well, the politics are getting played by the current DA, and that's something that I don't, that I want to stop, not continue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray, I've got the next question for you, 90 seconds. You were an assistant district attorney for just shy of 2 years in Oklahoma County. You resigned to go through the Edmond Police Academy, which I don't believe you completed. Years later, you now want to be district attorney. Why did you not stick with either of your prior law enforcement jobs to gain more experience for this position?
So my time as an assistant district attorney, I appreciated Mr. Prater hiring me in that role, and there was a time to transition into law enforcement at that point in 2009. I did not make it through that and had to move on with life. But for every door that closes, another one opens. To be honest with you, I did not see myself, almost 13 years ago, so July of 2009, standing here talking to everybody, trying to run for district attorney. It is something that has presented itself and something that I thought about for a long time. So to say that why didn't you stay in these law enforcement roles to gain experience to run for DA, I think I've gone to a different role and gained vast experience practicing law across the state in federal, state, and municipal courts all over. And I think that experience probably better equips me for the role as district attorney, because I've seen numerous cases, civil and federal, numerous forums, numerous lawyers, attorneys, prosecutors, and thousands of clients since. So,
all right, thank you.
Mr. Gieger, in December, 3 young women filed a civil lawsuit alleging sexual misconduct by your son and negligence of supervision by you. However, the lawsuit was dropped 2 weeks later. One of those cases was investigated by police, and your office recused from the charging decision. Cleveland County District Attorney Greg Mashburn ultimately decided not to file charges, although some wondered why he was assigned to the case since he formerly worked in the Oklahoma County office. You said this lawsuit had political design to affect your campaign, but an Edmond mother believes you used the power of your position to unfairly influence the investigation. How do you explain this situation to voters?
Well, the situation that I explained to voters is this. Whenever you occupy a position of power like this, people take shots at you. They've taken shots at me on many cases that I've tried. Right before Christmas, an unverified petition naming my family was filed. 8 business days later, it was dismissed. It was never served on me, but it was certainly served to the news media, and they ran stories on it. It was dismissed without me knowing who some of these people even are, and in fact, it contains many false allegations of conversations that I was alleged to have had with people I don't even know. If that doesn't ring of political motivations, I don't know what does. There's not a lawyer in this room who would not question a lawsuit being filed and then dismissed 8 business days later with no explanation whatsoever and never even being served. The false claims were investigated, and rightly so. Our office immediately recused when we learned of them. 3 different law enforcement agencies, not just Greg Mashburn, but 3 different law enforcement agencies investigated this. It's now been almost 4 years, and they're still trying to bring this up. It has been looked at and relooked at and relooked at because of my position, not because of the strength of the evidence. In fact, Nolan Clay, who wrote an article on it, said that the determination was made that whatever it was that this young lady has said happened to her wasn't a crime. It didn't constitute the elements of the crime. That's published in the Daily Oklahoman. I'm assuming that he's accurate in that based upon his investigation. I have a letter from the Edmond Police Department saying that it was looked at by 3 different law enforcement agencies, including the Attorney General's office, and all of them found it to be completely insufficient, and it is simply, it's simply a lie. And quite frankly, people talk about not wanting to do things for politics, but when you bring someone's children into a politically motivated attack, quite frankly, it's disgusting. I'm not going to make my children, I'm not going to make anybody else's children part of a political campaign or use them for political gain. You're not going to see them in commercials because that's not the appropriate place for kids. This is a false allegation, it is a lie, and let me say this. As DA, one of the decisions I make every day as an assistant prosecutor is realizing that when false allegations are made, because false allegations are made, if those things are carried out and the truth is not found out, it affects people's lives in devastating ways. And every investigator in this room that are shaking their head with me right now understand that when we staff our cases, we have an obligation to figure out what is truthful and what is not truthful. And to use something like this at this point for a political purpose, quite frankly, is appalling to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll chat with you after the thing. Thank you very much. Ms. Ford, last question to you. You were arrested in 2009 and detained in 2010 after incidents that allegedly involved alcohol and confrontations with law enforcement officers. Charges were filed but dismissed in one incident and no charges were filed in the other. Were the officers wrong in both instances, or did you do something that you regret?
I'm happy to answer these questions. The incident at the fair was me advising a young man who was surrounded by 5 law enforcement officers, interrogating him and his friends, and he was scared, he was shaking, he had tears in his eyes. I'm observing it from afar, and I said to the young man, "You have a right to remain silent. You can use it." In the business, we call that contempt of cop. I was arrested, I was handcuffed, I was taken back, where I met Oklahoma City police officers who I knew well, and I was given the choice. I was given the choice to go sit at the drunk tank and no charges to be filed, or we'll plaster your face all over the front page of the Daily Oklahoman, charge you with disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, and whatever else, and you'll beat us in court. But Ms. Ford, the damage will be done.
So you chose the first one?
I had been a practicing attorney for a very short period of time. I had an incredible amount of respect for my then boss, Bob Ravitz. and I wasn't going to bring that kind of embarrassment or humiliation to him. I see that officer who arrests me all the time. He regretted the choice by the time he got there, and he asked them to release me early, and they did. Because sometimes in this business, we make emotionally charged decisions. And those emotionally charged decisions, like Mr. Gieger just said, have long-term impacts. But here we are, some 12 years later, and this is the conversation we're having. If you want to have a conversation about what happened up at the lake, there was a bar that apparently, unbeknownst to me or anybody else in that bar, was illegally serving alcohol on a Sunday. Apparently it's dry. When they ran the tabs, my card was on file for my sister and all of her 20-something friends celebrating the end of the summer. All of them are bartenders and servers. I said, just put it on my card and we'll sort it out later. He called his buddy, the law enforcement officer. He came and arrested me and a number of other people for the same kind of jam. I think it was disorderly conduct, public drunk, and resisting arrest. We went to court. I had a conversation with the district attorney. He asked me to please come in and visit with him and law enforcement and give a full detailed explanation of what happened. I laughed and said, only a fool represents themselves. This is an arraignment. I wasn't expecting it. He said, we have a real problem with what happened to you and to your family and your friends, and we want to talk about it. We went and sat down and had a conversation about it. All the charges were dismissed, every one of them. I did not expunge nor ask to hide those records, because I want my clients to know, and every other person, that good things happen, bad things happen to good people, and people get wrongfully arrested all the time. I'm not even, didn't plead guilty, wasn't found guilty, wasn't convicted of a thing, and my political opponents leaked that story with the intention to tell you that I'm not qualified to be a district attorney. I am qualified. I've been arrested, I've been wrongfully accused, I have defended folks, I've been in that county jail. It is not a pleasant place to be. And I can stand here before every single one of you, including you, Mr. Savage, who I understand had to ask the zinger question, and say at some point a wrongful arrest is a wrongful arrest, and we can start talking about things that are more important and valuable, and knowing what it feels like is what makes me a qualified candidate. I'm not afraid of it, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Thank you very much. Real round of applause. That's the end of the rounds. We're going to give you 2 minutes, Ms. Ford, to start our closing statements, and you can take it to whatever topic you'd like. 2 minutes to you.
Well, I want to thank you guys again for having us here. I think that the four of us could probably stand up on a stage and debate all night if you gave us the opportunity, and I know we're running late. I am a lifetime Oklahoman. I have been serving my community most of my life, certainly my adult life as a lawyer. I am an educator. I train lawyers. I train law enforcement officers. I volunteer my time. I provide pro bono services. I work up cases for folks all of the time. I serve on boards of nonprofits. My heart is the heart of a servant. Making the choice to close my very successful private practice to be in this role was one that I had to really pray about and get serious with my family about the financial sacrifices and the burden that we were willing to take on such an important, powerful role of trust. It would be my honor to be the voice of change. It would be my honor to help rebuild policies and changes and work alongside the Oklahoma City Police Department and the good, fine officers, many of whom are here, who I have a really good, healthy relationship with as well. We have a real opportunity to bring positive change to Oklahoma County, and I think I'm the best candidate to do it. I am committed to bringing integrity, transparency, and accountability to that role. As the role of district attorney, as I said in my opening statements, has the most day-to-day impact on each and every one of our lives, whether you're a law enforcement officer, a mental health provider, a victim of a crime, or a person who's committed a crime or been accused of a crime. The person in this position needs to be a person that you can trust and who has experience in representing all kinds of folks. And my experience is not as Mr. Gigger's, 23 years in one office. I have a wide variety of experience representing victims as well.
Thank you very much. We've hit the 2-minute mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calvey, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you. So I appreciate that 3 of us up here want to see change. Ms. Ford, Mr. Gray, and myself recognized the need for serious change in the district attorney's office. I'm the only candidate here with a proven record of fighting for conservative causes. I prosecuted terrorists for the Army. I did everything other prosecutors do, just did it wearing body armor with a locked and loaded 9mm pistol strapped to my thigh in a hostile fire zone where you could hear a bomb detonating within a mile of that courthouse nearly every single day. The Army recognized my skill as a prosecutor by awarding me the Bronze Star Medal. After successfully prosecuting terrorists in a combat zone, I can easily manage the office prosecuting ordinary bad guys here. Where one did one's prosecuting is not a relevant matter. I've taken on public corruption, even when it involved my own party and the former governor, Mary Fallin. Unfortunately, the current district attorney's office has proven itself to be corrupt, abusing its authority to persecute those who disagree with the district attorney and refusing to pursue charges against their friends. I'll clean up the DA's office, and I'm sure, by the way, that most of the people that work in the DA's office are fine people, just a few at the top. I'll clean up that DA's office. I'll put the focus back on public safety, not political vendettas. For public safety, we need a DA who will support our police, not persecute them. That's why I'm supported by Sheriff Tommy Johnson. That's why I'm supported by former prosecutors, U.S. Attorney Bill Price, former prosecutor and governor Frank Keating, and former district attorney Rex Duncan. It is very important. We have a lot at stake in this election in a whole host of races, but with the district attorney's office, I concur with Ms. Ford that for what affects you day to day, we need a district attorney who is going to take seriously the rights of victims, including victims of sexual assault, and will prosecute fairly and not carry out political vendettas. I humbly ask for your vote June 28th.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gieger, 2 minutes to you, sir.
Thank you. This boils down to you want someone who knows how to do this job or someone who wants to learn how to do this job. The office of the district attorney is not a place for someone to go to on-the-job training. For 23 years, I have honed a skill set that makes it possible to be successful in trial. This year, my team has a 100% record. That's 10 trials just between January and now. Last year, it was in the 95% range. The reason that is the case is because these cases are very, very difficult, but you have to know what to do. You have to know what the law is. I take exception to Mr. Calvey's statement that prosecuting in alleged war criminals in a military combat zone is the exact same thing as doing a jury trial in Oklahoma County. As far as I know, Mr. Calvey's never even tried a jury trial in Oklahoma County, especially not a criminal trial. There may be some civil case he was involved in. Every day, the men and women in the DA's office that Mr. Calvey refers to will come to the DA and the supervisors in the DA's office to say, hey, here's the problem we are dealing with this trial. What should I do? What is the law? What motions need to be filed? You cannot walk into that position and know how to guide that office with zero experience. As far as I know, everyone in my office is supporting me for this, and I'm very, very honored by that. Because one thing I will agree with him on is the men and women of the DA's office work incredibly hard. They are up there on Saturdays and Sundays before trials. They do not get overtime for it. They do it because they love it. They do it because they are committed to it. And they do it because they are dedicated to keeping the men and women of Oklahoma County safe. And they do it with the leadership and the guidance of the supervisors, of which I am proud to be. I would humbly ask that you would consider voting for me for district attorney, so that you, in fact, know that you're getting a prosecutor and not a politician.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray, lastly, 2 minutes to you.
Yes. Thank you again for having us out here tonight. Again, my campaign comes down to leadership, service, and fairness. And that's something that we have to take serious every day. As the top prosecutor for Oklahoma County, we have to be prepared to do the right thing every time. We have to be prepared to do what is right when everybody else says you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. That's political suicide. And that's not what this game's about. That's not what this job's about. I have the experience from representing clients, like I said, in federal, state, and municipal forums all over this state to take all that experience and bring it to the DA's office and bring about a knowledge base that it's difficult to find, I would say. It's difficult to get out there and do as many cases as I have. You know, they say that familiarity breeds contempt. And maybe that's what's going on here in this race. But I think what we need is we need a change. We need a new regime. We need a new district attorney. We need somebody young like myself. We need somebody with experience like myself. We need somebody to come in here and take us forward into 2023. We don't need to go backwards. We need to go forward. And I believe that's what my vision is for this office. My vision is to be smart on crime. My vision is to support mental health and addiction. And my mission is to support the men and women of law enforcement. Because again, that is the backbone of our society of civil rule. That is who stands between us and the bad guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Round of applause to everybody. We're going to take a few minutes break. Thank you to our candidates for participating. Public debates matter. Thank you for everyone who's here, for our sponsors. We're going to take 10 to 15 minutes. We'll be back up with Democrats. Please take the conversations with these candidates outdoors into the foyer there. Thank you again.
my water?
Yes. You got an extra water.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Sure, no problem. Well, you can, whichever one you want. Sure.
There's not a whole lot of red. Am I testing?
All right. Let's just.
Good. Are we even? Perfect. Thank you. Just mine. Will you flip this guy? We're going to flip a coin real quick. Sorry. So we're going to do a coin flip to determine who gets to choose the order for opening statements. It's going to be an opposite flip. So if you pick to go first and someone who goes second, or vice versa. So whoever wins the coin flip, I'm going to let you call it in the air. Go. What would you like? Go open first and then close second. Okay. All right. Let me
Guarantee
get
I'm
there.
gonna knock this over.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at mine going, it's too tall to fit under here.
I know.
Well,
But I'll just
Behenna.
reach down if I need it.
Okay. Are we ready for a mic check, guys? We good? I'm very sorry to make you wait, although your
That's
opponents
okay.
in the Republican general were just dying to give you material, right?
Yeah.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Let me check my.
How long is our opening?
2 minutes, I believe. Yes, 2 minutes.
Okay, testing 1 2, check 1 2, check 1 2. I can make mine go higher potentially, maybe. No, I cannot.
It's the
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Check 1 2. I'm watching my phone because we've got a good. Okay, I'm good. Ms. Behenna,
Testing, 1 2. Testing, 1 2.
talk a little bit more.
Test, test. A B C D.
This is free time to get your message out, right? Okay. Are we good? Mr. Myles, let's try you.
testing 1 2, testing 1 2 3. More?
Okay. No, I think
Good.
I think we're good. He says Ryan says could be louder. Storm, are you
All
good?
right. Yeah. Check 1 2
Check
3
1,
4.
Okay. Somebody says my podium is to the left. That way left, so I need to go this way? Okay, thank you. All right, great. Perfect. Okay. Ryan, you let me know when we're ready to go, when we're live on the stream, and then we'll get started here in just a minute. I've got too many copies of the script.
I'll take one of those.
There you go. Yeah, all the previews are over there. Go ahead, Ryan, when you want to go live. Okay, we are live is the word on the street. So thank you very much. Welcome back to Subpoena Power, a night of debates for the candidates seeking Oklahoma County District Attorney. We heard from the 4 Republican candidates seeking their party's nomination earlier, and now we welcome the 2 Democratic candidates to the stage. If you're just joining us, my name is Trace Savage. I'm the editor of NonDoc.com. We're an independent online journalism publication. I'm on the stage with Storme Jones of News 9.
And if you're just joining us, you probably have found our stream at news9.com and the Facebook pages at News 9, NonDoc, and other media partners. Look for fact checks from UCentral Media students coming up in the coming days, so candidates choose your exaggerations carefully. All right?
That would be good advice. I listed the sponsors of our 2022 debate series earlier, but I'm going to list them again because they're that important. The State Chamber of Oklahoma, AARP Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Association of Realtors, the Oklahoma Public School Resource Center, the the advocacy firm of McSpadden, Milner, and Robinson, and the Overman Legal Group. Thank you all so much for believing in public debates. If you were here 30 minutes ago, you saw the importance of having these conversations. We're going to have another good conversation tonight. Storme.
Yep, just another reminder, please share the streams online so as many eyeballs can be more well-informed, as informed as we are, and also please silence your phones.
We're very tired, so we're going to get right into it. We're going to have 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. We'll have 3 rounds of questions, and then we'll also have 2-minute closing statements. We flipped a coin earlier. Ms. Vicki Behenna, you get to go first. Mr. Mark Myles, you will go second. Ms. Behenna, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, NonDoc Media, News 9, and UCentral Media for hosting this debate tonight. And Mark, thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here to have the opportunity to speak to the voters ahead of the primary on June 28th. I'm running for DA for Oklahoma County because experience matters. I was a federal prosecutor for 25 years right here in Oklahoma City. I prosecuted a multitude of crimes. I also was asked to assist in the investigation and prosecution of Timothy McVeigh. On April 19th, I was asked to be one of 7 prosecutors to be on that prosecution team when it moved to Denver to prosecute Timothy McVeigh. I was one of 2 Oklahomans on that prosecution team. We understood in that investigation that it was important to get it right. And we preserved the evidence, followed the evidence to make sure that prosecution was right. On October of 2015, I was asked and became the executive director of the Oklahoma Innocence Project. The Oklahoma Innocence Project is housed at OCU School of Law, and the students work to find evidence of innocence for the clients' clinics who have been wrongfully convicted. Again, I understood the importance of getting it right, finding the evidence of innocence and presenting that evidence to a court of law. No one running for district attorney has the 360-degree view of the criminal justice system that I do. I want to bring my experience together to ensure that the criminal justice system in Oklahoma serves and protects all the citizens of Oklahoma County with integrity and fairness. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Myles, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you. Thank you, NonDoc. Thank you, Channel 9. Vicki, it's good to see you again. My name is Mark Myles. I'm running for district attorney in Oklahoma County. I'm running to advocate for justice and fairness and accountability in the criminal justice system in Oklahoma County. When I talk about justice, I'm talking about protecting public safety because at the end of the day, that's the heart of what we do as prosecutors. When I talk about fairness, I'm talking about a criminal justice system that treats everybody justly, fairly, equitably, and with a common sense approach I've lost my train of thought from that perspective. And when I talk about accountability, I'm talking about holding not just the people who get charged accountable for their actions, but also holding the office of the district attorney to the highest possible standards, as well as holding our most vital partners to the highest possible standards. And our most vital partners, when I talk about them, I'm talking about the police, because they're the people who bring us the cases. They're the reasons that we oftentimes win cases. Sometimes they're the reasons why we lose cases. But I want them to do it the right way, and I think it's incumbent upon us to do that the right way. The district attorney is the highest law enforcement officer in the county, and it's where the public sees the impact of public policy, and it's where the rubber meets the road from that perspective. As your district attorney, I will ensure collaboration with the community, and it's something that we haven't seen for some time out of the current administration, but it's important to work with the community to go out and develop some programs, because at the end of the day, if we can do that and collaborate with the community, then we can hopefully forestall or prevent some of the things that happen that bring cases to the district attorney's office. So that means being accessible, and I commit to being accessible. That means being available, and that means listening to the community leaders.
Great, thank you. Did I cut you off? Well, thank you, Mr. Myles. I'm sorry. I guess I'm in a hurry to get out of here tonight after all this debate. Round of applause real quick for the opening statements. If you put the bottle that way. There we go. Okay, perfect.
Thank
Let's get to our first round of questions. This one is titled, What Would a Pro Say? I still think that's funny. Also,
Pro say, huh.
Each candidate will get 90 seconds to answer each question. Storm.
I even got that one. Hey, this first question will go to Ms. Behenna. Where did you go to law school, and what was the most important lesson you learned? 90 seconds.
I went to OCU School of Law. The most important lesson I think I learned in law school was that the law is not black and white, that there are a lot of gray areas in the law. And within that, a lawyer has to operate with integrity. Ethics was a very big subject when I was in law school, understanding professional ethics and the responsibility of a prosecutor to always present, or not just a prosecutor, but a lawyer in general, to always present the facts fairly and equally and justly, and not to lie to the court of law, not to lie to opposing counsel. And so ethics, as I said, was probably the most important lesson that I learned in law school.
Mr. Myles, same question. Where did you go to law school, and what was the most important lesson?
I went to the University of Oklahoma College of Law. I went later in life. I had a career. Actually, I was at IBM for 21 years before I went to law school, so I was a little bit older when I went to law school. So ethics, obviously, was one of the most important things, and the things that circle around being ethical when you practice as an attorney. And one of the things that I've never done, and I don't know that they actually taught it to you in that way, but I've never lied to a judge, and I think that's important. There's people out there that will say stretch the truth, and that's not necessarily a good thing. One of my law professors was a guy by the name of Andy Coates. Some of you may remember him. He was a former district attorney in Oklahoma County, and he and I share the same distinction in that we both were losing candidates for another political position once upon a time. But the thing that he said that he also taught was at the end of the day, if anybody's going to go to jail, you want it to be your client. So. That was kind of a joke, but that's the way it was.
It took me a second to get the joke. Okay, Mr. Myles, I've got another question for you. Let's talk about prosecutors specifically.
Okay.
Name a prosecutor whom you like, and if you could build a dream office as a district attorney, whom you would offer a job. What is it about them that you admire?
A prosecutor in real life or a prosecutor on television?
I was thinking of humans.
I worked with a guy named Andrew Benedict. Andrew was a prosecutor. He's in private practice now. Andrew came to Caddo County and was an assistant district attorney out there. And before he left that office, he was probably the lead attorney, essentially, out there for the Caddo County District Attorney's Office, which actually encompasses 4 different counties. Andrew has and had, well, he had at the time, he continues to have a common sense approach to the law. And he was able to look at a case, evaluate a case properly. He understood what it was worth and what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And he recognized when there was wrongdoing on the side of law enforcement that maybe made a case more suspect. And I admired him for what he did. He's actually a younger attorney than me in terms of the number of years that he's actually been an attorney. But I would offer him a job any day, and I have emulated him, I think, as a prosecutor because I've done that job as well. But Andrew Benedict.
Thank you very much. Ms. Behenna, the same question to you.
And the question is, who was my favorite or prosecutor that I liked and why?
Yeah, just somebody you would offer a job to because you think highly of them, and why.
Okay. I'm not going to talk hypothetically, but specifically. Obviously, I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 25 years. I worked with a number of career prosecutors in that office, and it would be unfair for me to select one of those as a person that I liked best above the others, because I think I can say truthfully that every one of the prosecutors that I worked with understood the role of a prosecutor was to seek justice first, to follow the evidence, and wherever that evidence led, to file the appropriate charges, and to make appropriate sentencing recommendations based upon the defendant that was in front of them. And so I don't want to, if you will allow me, not to pick a specific prosecutor, but more to refer to all the prosecutors that I worked with in the U.S. Attorney's Office that understood the role of a prosecutor and the effect that that prosecutor can have if they make a wrong decision on the lives of people that are charged in the criminal justice system.
Well, it's your unlucky day because I am going to make you name somebody. Give us one name, somebody
Okay.
you like.
You know what I'll do? I'll name two because they're sitting here in this audience. I'll name
Perfect.
Carrie Kelly and Dan Weber.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, Mr. Weber, we get to meet finally. Good to meet you. Okay, terrific. Storme, next question.
All righty, this next question will go to Ms. Behenna first, and it's a lengthy one. So, an absurd and aggravating string of events has called into the culture of the Oklahoma County Courthouse in recent years, from an Oklahoma City police detective saying he perjured himself in signing an affidavit about a police shooting. Former Judge Kendra Coleman was removed from office. Former Judge Tim Henderson resigned and remains under criminal investigation for alleged sexual misconduct involving ADAs, which has also raised questions about dozens of past convictions. With all of this drama and more, how can Oklahoma County residents trust justice will be served? And is it a matter of personal ethics for the individuals, or does there need to be a broader effort to hold people in the criminal justice system to a higher standard? 90 seconds.
Okay, well, that's a lot, so let me try to unpack that. I'm running for district attorney because I believe the tone of an office is set by the person at the top of that chain. There are rules that prosecutors have to abide by, and the district attorney has to ensure that that guidance is set within that office. I don't know the specific facts about Judge Henderson or Judge Coleman and the things that surrounded that. I'm aware of the police officer that said that he made a false statement on his affidavit. But what I can tell you is that there will be an expectation in the DA's office the day I walk in that prosecutors operate with integrity. And if things happen where there are personal relationships within the office, personal relationships between judges or defense counsel, those issues will be addressed by me specifically, because it does affect the integrity of the criminal justice system. People have lost trust in the criminal justice system, and they have to know that everybody is going to be held accountable, prosecutors and staff within the DA's office, including citizens of Oklahoma County who are going to be held responsible for criminal charges.
Mr. Myles, 90 seconds. How do you clean it up?
Same question. When I announced I was running for district attorney, I said that accountability was going to be one of the issues. And when I said accountability, I meant that holding the office of the district attorney to the highest possible standards, as well as the other people who encompass that. Talking about the things you raised, I'm aware of the Judge Henderson issues. Obviously, there's some serious questions about what actually happened there. We don't know. But as the district attorney, I will address any inappropriate and personal relationships between the staff and the court. And when I say the court, I mean by judges. With regards to other issues, it's not, I heard, I think both of us are running because a lot of the people here saw the last debate. And we think, both of us think, that we're probably better suited to be able to run the office than the parties on the other side. But those are my personal feelings. I think she feels the same way. It's incumbent upon us as the leaders in the office to work to ensure that the culture is understood that we're going to do things the right way all the time, whether it's with prosecutors, and we don't have to win every case. Somebody bragged, we won 100% of our cases. The goal isn't to necessarily win every case. The goal is to get it right. And sometimes getting it right is losing a case, and that's not a problem. So we'll do it the right way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Myles, first to you this question. One of the strong and controversial powers of America's criminal justice system is civil asset forfeiture, a process by which law enforcement and district attorneys can seize private property, such as cash or vehicles, on behalf of the government without charging or prosecuting the suspects with crime. To what extent and when would you, as district attorney, authorize civil asset forfeiture?
I've handled a number of cases of civil asset forfeiture over the years. I don't know if I can get through the story in 90 seconds. It's 90 seconds, right?
Well, we'll let you try.
Western Oklahoma, Caddo County, Desert Storm. The DA in Southwest Oklahoma came up with an idea basically to generate revenue for the office. And what he did was he went out and he hired private contractors to come to Oklahoma and drive police cars in Oklahoma. They weren't CLEAT certified. They pulled people over on the highway who were people of color, who were driving out-of-state cars, and they would pull them over and they would find a reason to get into the car, and if they found money, they would seize it. If they found guns, they would seize them. If they found drugs, they would take them to jail, and they filed civil forfeitures against all of those. It's inappropriate from that perspective. The Supreme Court has said that if you are pursuing civil forfeitures as a form of punishment against the people, it's inappropriate. It falls under the excessive fines clause of the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So that's not going to be the primary focus of what I do if I'm elected as a district attorney in Oklahoma County.
But there still might be some instances when you would consider it appropriate. What would
there
those
still
be?
may, well, I can think of an instance where if you've got somebody who's a significant drug trafficker who has significant property, as an example, driving down a highway with a tractor trailer full of drugs and money associated with it, I think that it would be appropriate in a situation like that. But for the individual person, everyday run-of-the-mill, where you take their car and it's their only mode of transportation because they've got a marijuana butt in a car, that's inappropriate. That's happened in the past. It should not happen.
Ms. Behenna, 90 seconds, same question to you.
You know, so the Supreme Court has determined that asset forfeiture, civil and criminal asset forfeiture, is an important and useful punishment. And because it deprives those who are using illegal activity to gain assets, money included. But as I will say many times during this debate, and we've all talked about before, evidence and facts matter. You cannot seize somebody's assets and money in their car without having evidence that that money is tied to some criminal activity. So there has to be a nexus between those two things. You can't just take money because you suspect somebody is doing illegal activity. You actually have to have evidence of that. And so while asset forfeiture is a sanctioned and appropriate punishment in the right case, it's the facts that make a district attorney decide whether or not it's an appropriate case. So again, the facts matter. I would make sure that law enforcement, with their pulling people over, that they're using probable cause to believe the person was involved in criminal activity before they pull them over, or they do a search of a car to find assets in the car. So as I said, facts matter, and that's always what I'm going to come back to here.
Thank you very much. That's the end of round one. Let's give a round of applause to both our candidates. Like in the first debate, our second round of questions is called the police and the jail. And we're going to start with the same show of hands we had in the last debate. Storme.
On June 28th, the same day that you all will be on the ballot, Oklahoma County voters will be asked to approve or reject $260 million in bonds for the construction of a new county jail. Raise your hand if you will be voting yes on that question. All right, Ms. Behenna, why? And then Mr. Myles, why are you voting yes, ma'am?
Have you been to the county jail?
I have. Spent an evening in there for a story.
I wouldn't want my friends, my family members, to spend one night in that jail. And what we know is that many people are spending much more time than one a day or 1 hour in that jail. It is unsanitary. It is unclean. There is not medical assistance for the people that need medical assistance. There's not mental health assessments in that jail. We need a new jail. It's not working. I went to a Chamber of Commerce forum this afternoon at lunch where I heard the chamber members, in particular it was Jim Couch and the commissioner, talk about why they need a new jail. Now, I'm not an economic development lawyer. I don't understand the financing parts. I intend to read up on that a little bit more, but it is unquestionable that Oklahoma County needs a new jail.
Mr. Myles, you indicated you won't be supporting the bond.
Well, actually, I'm undecided at this point. I've been in the jail. I was locked in the jail visiting with one of my clients years ago for about 2 hours because nobody came and got me when we were done, from about 2 o'clock in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the morning. And that highlights one of the problems with the jail in that they're understaffed. The people who work there are underpaid. There aren't enough of them. I will agree that the jail is a horrible place. It's not clean, it's not sanitary, there's too many people in it, obviously it's overcrowded. I hope to address part of that problem if I'm elected as district attorney by advocating for bonds that are more reasonable, that are fair, that are attainable for people so that we can get rid of some of the overcrowding, which is one of the issues that we have with the jail. Now, with regards to the specifics of the bond itself, we actually don't know how much the jail is going to cost. I think they want to raise $260 million, but we don't know how much it's actually going to cost. We don't know how long it's going to take to build it. We don't know where it's going to be. So there's a lot of issues with regards to that. With regards to the funding, my understanding is, and I also need to delve into that, we've got a pretty good credit rating in Oklahoma County, but my understanding is the rate of interest on the measure that's going to be put before the people is much higher than probably what market rates are. So I'm undecided about that. I think we could do a better job by building a new mental health facility to address the issues that the jail has.
We're 13 days away. We're 13 days away, though, from the election. I don't know that, is there going to be something that happens between now and then that kind of sways you one way or the other? I'm not asking you as, trying to violate the Australia rule, right, of telling us your ballot, but I'm curious where you lean on this. Where do you want your supporters to
I'll
go?
concede that we need a new jail, for starters, okay? I will tell you that because we've been busy doing other things. I'm still a practicing attorney while I'm campaigning. I haven't done all of the research to be able to make an informed decision, and all I'm saying is everybody needs to make an informed decision when they decide whether they're going to vote yes or no on it. And I've supported typically all of the things that have been put before the taxpayers, like all of the MAPS issues in the past. I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to make an informed decision.
This seems like a little bit of a difference. Ms. Behenna, 30 seconds if you'd like it to talk, to rebut what you're hearing.
Well, I wish we would have the opportunity to have more information between now and June 28th. The fact is that we do not. And, listening to people, the jail trust, and the individuals that are involved in the jail and what they're wanting to do, I mean, I understand that it's something that maybe the citizens would like to have a little more detail on before they vote. It's not going to happen, and we need a new jail, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you very much. Storme, you have the next question.
This next question will start with Ms. Behenna. Cash bail is used by the court to help ensure defendants will appear for trial when released from jail, but some people simply cannot pay their portion of the bail, and it means they stay in Oklahoma County for months or longer, which keeps them away from their families and puts their jobs at risk. What is your philosophy on using cash bail, and would you change any bail practices within Oklahoma County's district attorney's office if you're elected?
Yeah, I had a meeting with Bob Ravitz, who's in the public defender's office, about this issue and about how bond is set in Oklahoma County. And it's my understanding that in years past, the public defender's office and the DA would get together and they would schedule bond for certain offenses. That hasn't happened in a long time. And it needs to. There needs to be a dialogue. When we're talking about an individual being charged with a particular crime and setting a bond schedule for those particular crimes, that needs to be done in consultation with the public defender's office so that advice can be given to the judge in determining that bond to be set. I think more people should have the availability to be able to get out on OR bonds. If somebody is a nonviolent offender, coming up with $200 to be able to put that money forward to be able to get a bondsman, to be able to get out of jail so they can go back to their job and continue to work and support their family, sometimes is too much. I understand also that sometimes when the DA's office doesn't charge somebody within the requisite 120 days and those charges aren't filed and the bond is exonerated, that individual can then And if charges are filed later, that individual might have to put up another $200 to get another bondsman to bond them out on that charge that's just been filed. It's unfair. In the federal system, we have a system where we look at the individual and whether or not they're a flight risk and a danger to community, and those facts are considered when we set bond.
For the folks at home, OR, own recognizance?
Yes.
No cash paid?
No cash.
Mr. Myles, 2 minutes, same question.
So I am an advocate for making bonds more reasonable, attainable, and affordable. And when we talk about, the goal is, for a lot of people out there, is no cash bond. The way we do it in the federal system is an evaluation is made as to whether or not a person is a risk to public safety. So if they're charged with a really serious crime, they're probably not going to get out. Or if they're a flight risk, as in what is the likelihood that they're not going to come back to court. In Oklahoma County, we have a bond schedule. It is basically printed up, and a judge looks at it, and if a person's charged with a certain crime, he goes down a list, first-degree burglary, $50,000, and that's it. Okay, so that's how it works. In other counties, and I've practiced in a lot of other counties, and when I was a prosecutor up in Logan County, the prosecutors made the individual decision by assessing the individual facts for the case to make a determination as to what the bond should be for that particular person. And usually, whatever the prosecutor says, this is what I recommend, is what the judge says, this is what it's going to be. So we have a statute in the state of Oklahoma that allows for OR bonds. I'm an advocate for getting rid of the schedule in Oklahoma County, figuring out how to assess each and everything so that we can make an informed decision about whether or not a person should have to put up money to be able to get out of jail, or should they be the recipient of an OR bond. And there's some programs within Oklahoma County that allow for a person to get out on an OR bond, but typically they have to stay in jail for a while. When a person goes to jail, it has the potential to ruin their lives because they could lose their job, they could miss their rent payment, they could have everything taken away from them, and we need to be cognizant of that as prosecutors when somebody's charged with a crime.
Thank you very much, Mr. Myles. I've got the next question for you. I have, in the meantime, learned through 2 debates that if you put the water bottle that way, it will not roll off the thing, so that might be helpful to you. Since 2020, current District Attorney David Prater has filed charges against at least 7 Oklahoma County jail employees for allegations that include falsifying records related to suicide, smuggling contraband, assault and battery, and in one instance, I think multiple instances, forcing individuals who are handcuffed to a wall and making them listen to Baby Shark on repeat. Has Mr. Prater done enough to seek justice for the dozens of people who have died in the Oklahoma County Jail in recent years, or is there something else a DA needs to do to hold jail administrators and the jail trust accountable?
You're asking me to be critical of a person who is essentially the attorney for the jail, which they're kind of at odds with each other from that perspective. The issues with the jail are issues in the jail because of the administration of the jail, the inability to hire enough people, the inability to pay people the way they're supposed to be paid. The district attorney is responsible for the charging decision, and if people are breaking the law, they should be charged. Is he doing enough? It's hard to say. People are still dying of fentanyl overdoses in the jail. That's a problem. You know, when somebody's arrested on the charge of larceny and then they die in the Oklahoma County Jail because of a fentanyl overdose, that's a problem. Now, you can't point to the district attorney for that problem. It's a problem with the overall administration of the jail. It's kind of a separate issue. If charges are appropriate, charges should be filed. I have no problem with him filing charges. If he files more charges, is that going to change anything? I think the answer is probably no. They're still going to have the same issues with not having enough people, not paying them enough, et cetera, and all of the other incumbent problems that accompany the jail at this time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Behenna, same question to you. Is there enough being done to seek justice for the people who have died and faced other fates in the jail, or is there something else the DA needs to do to hold jail administrators and the governing body, the jail trust, responsible?
Yeah. Well, let me answer the question by first addressing the correctional officers and whether or not they should be charged for bringing contraband into the jail. Correctional officers are hired to do a very difficult job, and I understand that. And I understand that they don't get always the best and brightest candidates sometimes because of how difficult it is to be a correctional officer. But when somebody takes on the role of being a correctional officer, they are in a position of trust. They are in a position to take care of the inmates or the detainees that are there in that jail. I don't know if any of you know this, but almost 80% of the people that are detained in the Oklahoma County Jail today have not been convicted. These are people that are being held pre-trial. And so correctional officers have to be held to a particular standard. And as district attorney, I would charge correctional officers that brought contraband into the office or into jail. I can tell you a real quick story. I had a case recently where my client showed up at a court hearing high on methamphetamine, and he had been in not the Oklahoma County Jail, but the Tulsa County Jail. Now, how is it possible? How is there not an investigation to determine how that contraband got into the jail? It's the same problem with fentanyl that we have now in Oklahoma County Jail. People are dying of using fentanyl or methamphetamine or any other illicit drug. There ought to be a darn good investigation to figure out how it got there, because I can tell you the detainees didn't bring it in.
So is the DA currently doing enough? Does more need to be done? Does, a point need to be made? I mean, what is the role of the district attorney? And I'm not saying it is or isn't, I'm just curious your thoughts.
The role of the district attorney is to investigate those kinds of incidents, for sure. I don't know who's accountable, because I don't know the facts of those cases, but an investigation definitely needs to be done.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next question begins with Ms. Behenna. One of your potential Republican opponents has pledged to drop charges on Oklahoma City police officers who Mr. Prater, the current DA, is prosecuting for the shooting death of 17-year-old Stavian Rodriguez. Mr. Prater has charged several police officers with crimes during his time in office. How do you balance partnering with police departments to protect the public with the DA's obligation to seek justice for people allegedly mistreated by the police? 2 minutes.
I come from a law enforcement family. As I said, I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 25 years. My husband, who is here tonight, was an OSBI agent for 25 years, retired from that and went to work for the FBI. And so I think if you talk to most law enforcement officers, they will tell you that law enforcement officers want to keep good cops and good law enforcement officers and get rid of law enforcement officers that will not abide by the rule of law. I'm going to tell this audience exactly what I told the FOP when I was visiting with them a couple of weeks ago. If a police officer abides by his training and uses appropriate force, he has nothing to fear from the district attorney's office. But a police officer who uses excessive force and doesn't abide by his training will be investigated like any other murder or shooting incident in Oklahoma County. And so as the district attorney, I think there's an understanding between the district attorney and law enforcement. And I think that they understand that a district attorney has to investigate those kinds of cases, understanding that we can continue to work together. They can continue to bring cases because, as I said before, I don't think that there's a police officer that is serving now that wants a bad cop on the force. I've pledged to work with the Oklahoma City Police Department and the other local police departments to build that trust and communication between the district attorney's office and them. And I think that will continue to work forward as the district attorney, even though I might investigate law enforcement officers for actions that they decide to take.
Quick follow-up question. You said there's an understanding between law enforcement and the district attorney. I think if you were to ask the FOP right now, they would not be so understanding with Mr. Prater's charging decisions recently. Is the balance appropriate now, or is it tilted one way or the
No.
other in regards to prosecuting officers?
And I misspoke. What I meant is when I take over. I mean, I've already started that dialogue with law enforcement officers, trying to understand the problems that they have. I think they feel that their cases are not being reviewed by the DA's office, that charges are not being made or filed quick enough. And so that's what I'm talking about. I think, and I absolutely agree, that if you ask law enforcement officers now in Oklahoma County, they would say that there is not a good relationship with the DA's office. I want to work toward that. We have to work collaboratively.
Okay. Mr. Myles, same question. How do you balance that partnership with the DA's obligation to seek justice for folks mistreated by police?
Again, I've talked about accountability, and the issue, obviously there's an issue right now or a perceived issue between law enforcement and the district attorney's office, and that's unfortunate. Charges should be filed where charges are appropriate. What I've been convicted to do, what I have pledged to do, is to work and collaborate with law enforcement to say, we want you to do things, we want you to do them the right way, we want to hold you to the highest standards because it's important to us. It helps us to be able to successfully prosecute cases. And I'm committed to making sure that all of them have the highest possible training, that we do everything we can to make sure that they're properly trained, they do things the right way, and that will help ensure that when they encounter a situation, and they encounter all kinds of situations, but when they encounter a stressful situation, that they resort to their training to do the right thing. And I've got a case right now, I'll give you an example, of a guy who was shot by an Oklahoma City police officer. He was shot with his AR-15. The guy who was shot actually had a gun. There were two officers who responded to that scene. The second officer who was there came around the car with his gun drawn. The guy had already been shot, and he had his gun leveled on the guy, and he saw that he didn't have the gun in his hand, so he didn't shoot him. He would have died if he'd had a gun in his hand, okay? That's not necessarily an application of or a misuse of force in that situation, but his training kicked in and he made a good decision. And my goal is to make sure that they have the best possible training so they know that when they encounter certain situations, they know what to do, they can default to that. If they're doing something wrong, that's a separate case, a separate issue, and if charges are appropriate, they're going to be charged.
Thank you, Mr. Myles. There has been some debate about the process and timeline for law enforcement officers to review body camera footage after critical incidents. The county sheriff's office policy allows deputies to review their camera footage prior to being questioned by investigators. OKCPD initially had the same policy, but an independent consultant recommended conducting the interviews prior to letting officers review footage. Which order do you favor and why?
If an officer reviews his body cam footage prior to being interviewed, it will allow that person to probably better provide a truer indication of what actually happened versus if an officer is interviewed first and then reviews his body camera footage later. The issue is, are they telling the truth when they tell their story ultimately? And ultimately the truth will come out as a consequence of the body cam footage if the body cam is properly working. So it shouldn't matter from my perspective. It shouldn't matter. And as I stand up here and think about it kind of on the fly, I default back to they're going to have an opportunity to make a statement one way or the other, whether it's with their body cam footage or without their body cam footage. We want them to get it right. If they get it wrong, and the issue is probably if they get it wrong and then we find out way down the road that they lied, that's where the issue arises. And so maybe they should review their body cam footage up front so they can get their story right. Now, if they change their story after the body cam footage comes out, even after they've seen it because they're trying to cover something up, again, that's a separate issue that we would have to deal with down the road.
Thank you very much. Ms. Behenna, which order do you prefer?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting question. And as we're discussing this, my first instinct, I think, is to say, well, no, they shouldn't review their body cam footage first. But I do know that when people are operating in a stressful situation, they don't remember facts. I mean, it's the very reason why two eyewitnesses to an incident can remember an accident, for instance. absolutely differently from different perspectives. So I think in order for me to be able to answer this appropriately and fully informed, I would want to talk to law enforcement officers and maybe even these outside advisors who have advised the police department on these issues to kind of get their perspective. I mean, the body cam doesn't lie. If it's turned on when it's supposed to be turned on, the body cam doesn't lie. And so somebody, makes up a story about what happens before the body camera started. I don't know if that's a possibility. I just feel that in order for me to properly address this issue, it would probably be important for me to understand the reasons why they felt that body camera should not be viewed before the officer gives a statement. Again, only because I feel that it's a stressful situation and maybe somebody's memory they just wouldn't remember everything that happened until they had a chance to see that.
Yeah,
I'm on the fence with that.
I'm going to clarify a little bit and give you both 15 seconds if you want to add anything else. I think the recommendation is the argument that just as you said, during that incident, adrenaline's up, people don't remember exactly every little detail. And the concern is that if they review the footage first before they give a statement, then, possibly are they trying to explain what they remember based on now what they've just seen. Not exactly, here's what I was remembering, here's what I was thinking, here's what I believed, which is the question, right? What is the state of mind, the decision-making process? So 15 seconds to either of you if that helps clarify what the debate about the issue is.
Well, I'll go first. I'll let you go second. The issue is, do they remember what happened and do they get it right? At the end of the day, we want them to get it right. That's an argument for reviewing the body cam footage. They may look at the body cam footage and find out that they really screwed up. And maybe that's what the issue is. And then they try to cover something up. And that's where the issue continues. So we want them to get it right. The best way for them to get it right is let's look at the body cam footage and see what it says and go from there.
15 seconds, any thoughts?
No, I understand the issue. And again, I think for me to answer this appropriately and fully, I want to understand and think about the pros and cons of each of those.
Wonderful. That's the end of our second round of questions. Thank you very much. We're going to have our third round of questions titled A Prosecutor's Politics. We did phrase these questions in a way to have you both kind of answer. But first, we do have another show of hands.
We've asked you and your Republican opponents about important issues tonight because Trace and I believe public debates matter. With that in mind, raise your hand if you'll commit to debating the Republican nominee in the general election.
Oh, that'd be
gladly.
easy.
There we go. Okay. Well, we'll see you all back here in October-ish, something like that.
All righty, but before we get there to the general election, one of you must win the Democratic primary. Mr. Myles, in 2018, you were the de facto Democratic nominee for Attorney General, but 6 weeks before the general election, more than 20 prominent of your fellow Democrats announced their endorsement of Mike Hunter, the Republican candidate. If the Democratic establishment in the state supported a Republican over you in 2018, how can you convince voters you can win this year?
Well, I don't know that the people who supported my opponent, Mr. Hunter, at that time reflected the will of the people of Oklahoma County. Because in Oklahoma County, I got 48% of the vote in basically a red wave state. The Republicans won every single county. So I don't know that their individual feelings really impacted my race that much, probably impacted the governor's race more than my race. Oklahoma County historically has elected people from the Democratic Party as the district attorney. It's an important race. The reason it's an important race is because the district attorney in Oklahoma County has the potential and the opportunity to investigate corruption at the state capitol. And that's the reason why the Republicans really want to win this race, because we've got kind of an autocratic governor here who wants to handpick the people that are out there around him, and he would rather not have somebody or anybody looking over his shoulder. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be an issue from the perspective of our race. I think that the Democrats, the true Democrats, are going to come out and support us, and I think that our message probably resonates more with the independents out there And when you look at the independents and the Democrats in Oklahoma County, from a demographic perspective, the numbers certainly favor our side.
Ms. Behenna, whom did you vote for in November 2018, Mr. Myles or Mr. Hunter, and why?
I believe I voted for Mr. Hunter, and primarily because of his experience of having been in that office. As I said, a prosecutor's role is not to step in. I mean, a prosecutor can't be somebody like in this DA's race where we have somebody on the Republican side who's running as a politician. And I think the role of a prosecutor takes experience, understanding what the role of a prosecutor is. And so I didn't know Mr. Myles at that time. I didn't know anything about his background and experience. And so based upon that, and knowing that Mr. Hunter had been in that job and had the experience, I voted for him.
Thank you very much.
Do I get 15
Sure,
seconds?
yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
So I was hired to be a prosecutor in Logan County because the DA up there wanted somebody who could walk in day one and try a case. And he had somebody up there who worked for him who, when the day of trial came, he called in sick. So he hired me. I could walk in day one and try a case, and I did that, and that's all I'll say.
Thanks.
Ms. Behenna, it strikes me that Mr. Hunter ended up resigning suddenly amid some questions about some of the things he was doing, perhaps politically with his office. You know, there are various conversations that have been reported about. Do you regret that decision now? Do you think he did a good job?
I'm not going to say I always get it right.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. I have the next question for you. In 2008, and it turns to a somber topic, your son, Michael, fatally shot a naked man he was questioning about a roadside bomb in Iraq. A military court convicted him of unpremeditated murder, even though he argued the man had attempted to take his weapon. In 2019, then President Donald Trump pardoned your son after advocacy from yourself and other Oklahoma political leaders, such as Mr. Hunter. Still, former President Trump is not popular among Democrats who will vote in the June 28th election. How do you convince Democrats of your Democratic bona fides if they ask you your opinion of former President Trump?
Well, okay. Let me say this with regard, and correct you on some facts with regard to Michael.
Please.
Okay? So one of the things that, having been a federal prosecutor and understanding the ethical obligations of a prosecutor, one of the things that was absolutely improper in Michael's case is that, I mean, you said that you know, he alleged that it was self-defense here, or that he was shooting this man. The forensic evidence supported that Michael shot in self-defense, that the man was standing at the time he was shot. We didn't figure that out. We didn't know about that until after Michael was convicted. The prosecutors were well aware of their forensic expert had told them that they believed that this was self-defense and that Michael shot in self-defense, but that evidence was not turned over until Michael was convicted. That is an absolute unethical and unconstitutional violation by a prosecutor to withhold exculpatory evidence that could help a defendant in his defense of his case or at his sentencing. One of the reasons I went to the Oklahoma Innocence Project is because I understood the types of mistakes that can happen in prosecutions that can lead to innocent people getting convicted of crimes that they should not be convicted of. It was Michael that got me to fight for two men from the north side of Tulsa who were convicted of first-degree murder with absolutely no evidence, and to work to find evidence to find them innocent of those crimes. I would fight for my son in the situation that he was in any day of the week, as I would fight for anybody else who felt that they were wrongfully convicted and there was evidence to prove their innocence.
And your thoughts on, you know, former President Trump? Because certainly you appreciate the decision he made in that regard.
You know, I am not a Trump supporter, if that's what you want me to say. I live in a divided household. My husband is a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I didn't vote for Trump, if that's what you want me to say. Am I eternally grateful that he pardoned my son? Of course I am. I would be grateful if he pardoned half the clients in the Oklahoma Innocence Project as well, or if the governor would do it.
Thank you. Mr. Myles, we heard, we talked about Mr. Hunter just a minute ago. Does Ms. Behenna's connection to some, powerful, influential Republican folks in the state, is that something Democratic voters should find concerning, or can that be an asset for a Democrat to win this seat in November?
It's not concerning to me from the perspective of, as a parent, any parent would fight to the ends of the earth for their child. My wife's parents did that for her brother. And so I understand where she was, and I know that she appreciates what happened. And the fact that it was Donald Trump is, he was the president at the time. So, if Joe Biden had been there, he'd probably done the same thing. If Barack Obama was there, he probably would have done the same thing. With regards to whether or not it's an asset, I called Ms. Behenna's son, actually, not the one who was charged, but her other son. I think it's Brett. Is it Brett? And talked to him after I got into the race. And I said she was probably better suited to run for Attorney General than I was, because I think her story probably resonates with more of the people of the state of Oklahoma with regards to what happened with their son than it will be an asset necessarily in Oklahoma County. So that's my perspective on it.
15 seconds, anything?
I don't think I have any follow-up.
Okay, no worries. Storme.
Yeah, Mr. Myles, what does a Democrat have to do to win this race in November, and why are you the best candidate to appeal to not only Democrats but moderates as well?
Well, we just have to campaign. We have to go door to door. We have to talk to people. I think our message is a better message. Some of the people here heard what the Republicans, the people campaigning as Republicans, had to say, and by and large, it's a law and order, lock them up kind of mentality. We haven't talked about racial justice at all tonight. 1 in 3 black men in the United States can expect to be incarcerated over the course of their lifetime versus 1 in 17 white men. In Oklahoma, where blacks are 12% of the population, they comprise 40% of the people in the Department of Corrections. And then we add in people who are Hispanic. It's a small percentage, but it's a much greater percentage as reflected in DOC. And then when you add in Native Americans, it's the same. And then when you add in lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transsexuals, people who identify as queers, it's the same. The percentages are way up here. We are, well, in my perspective, and she may mirror me in some of those regards, I'm campaigning from the perspective of making Oklahoma, instead of making Oklahoma the #1 state for incarceration, let's make Oklahoma the #1 state for diversion programs. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. There's no reason why we should spend $24,000 a year or more locking as many people up as we can when people who are arguably guilty of a nonviolent offense can be better managed somewhere else. And if we're the #1 program, or #1 from the perspective of diversion programs, we have programs to address a lot of those issues. We have drug courts, we have DUI courts, we have mental health courts. Mental health is a big, big issue. We have veterans courts, we have programs for women so that women don't have to be locked up. And I think that message alone resonates with a lot of the people out there. And if we can do that job and do it right and do it well, we can fix a lot of the problems in the state of Oklahoma.
Ms. Behenna, what does a Democrat have to do to win this race in November?
Well, I guess we have forgotten that David Prater won as a Democrat. So this is not a political office. This is not a positioning office. This is an office, as I've said before, of experience, somebody who understands the in and outs of the criminal justice system is the person that ought to be elected as district attorney. I've seen the criminal justice system from all sides. I've seen it as a prosecutor, I've seen it as a defense lawyer, I've seen it having a family member go through the criminal justice system and the pain and the concern that that causes. I've also seen the criminal justice system from the wrongful conviction point and what happens when we don't get it right. We have got a good criminal justice system, but we're human beings and we make mistakes, and we have to understand what those mistakes are. So the importance of the DA is not whether or not they're a Democrat or a Republican, but who is the person that has the best experience to understand the charging decisions that need to be made, the sentencing recommendations that need to be made, and what is appropriate for that particular defendant. I think all of us on this stage would agree. People don't need to go to jail for 20 and 30 years on every crime. We need to look at the individuals that are in front of us, the defendants that are being charged, and make decisions about what's appropriate for that defendant. Does that defendant have mental health issues? Does that defendant have substance abuse issues? Does that individual have childhood trauma or trauma that they have never dealt with? Only an experienced prosecutor understands how those things come into play in making those decisions. So it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, and that's what I would tell the voters.
Thank you very much. I have the last question of this round for you, Ms. Behenna. Current District Attorney David Prater has charged and prosecuted a number of elected officials during his time in office. He clashed with a judge who was ultimately removed from office, and he recently investigated the Pardon and Parole Board and with an Oklahoma County grand jury. Has Mr. Prater been justified in these pursuits, or has he waded too far into politics, as some people critique?
You know, the role of a prosecutor is to investigate and prosecute crimes. When I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I investigated a number of public corruption cases. There is a role for a prosecutor and law enforcement to review the actions of elected officials. I don't know the facts of the cases that Mr. Prater's office has brought, and I'm not going to speculate on what the facts are and why he brought those charges. But absolutely, a district attorney, particularly the district attorney of Oklahoma County, knowing that many in the state legislature sit here in Oklahoma City when they're making decisions, absolutely that office ought to be involved in investigating and prosecuting when the evidence presents that somebody has been involved in public corruption. As I said, I did that in a number of cases. When I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I prosecuted both Democrats and I prosecuted Republicans. Again, it doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. The facts lead where the facts lead. Based upon those facts, during the investigation, charging decisions should be made based upon those facts. Again, it doesn't matter who you're trying to get at or who hurt you or who you don't like. That is not even in the equation that a prosecutor should make.
Thank you very much. Mr. Myles, the same question to you. Has Mr. Prater been justified in his pursuits that involve corruption in political matters, or has he waded too far into the political arena?
The outside appearances are that in some situations he's probably been a little bit more political than perhaps he should have been. But again, I too don't have all of the facts in those situations. I was a little bit surprised with his decision to go after the Pardon and Parole Board. My sense was that, and the sense of some other people, was that he wasn't happy with some of the decisions that were made by the Pardon and Parole people, and as a consequence he went after them. The question is, was there something corrupt about what they were doing? Again, I don't know the answer, but the measuring stick should be, is somebody doing something wrong? Is somebody doing something inappropriate? The office of the district attorney is a very powerful office in the state of Oklahoma by virtue of its proximity to the state capitol. And it's incumbent upon whoever occupies that office to do the right thing based upon what evidence is out there, based upon whether or not there are credible allegations of wrongdoing. And you referenced a couple of judges. I can think of 3 judges that have stepped down over the course of about the last 6 years. I can't speak as to why they all were received the attention from the office of the district attorney, but the relationship between the district attorney and the court, the judges in Oklahoma County needs to be professional. There don't need to be inappropriate relationships, and the district attorney shouldn't be swinging his weight around or her weight around in order to get more favored outcomes by the office of the district attorney.
Thank you very much. That's the end of round 3. Round of applause real quick. And we'll conclude with 2-minute opening statements. Openings. We'll start a third debate. We'll conclude with closing statements. Mr. Myles, you're up first, followed by Ms. Behenna.
Thank you. So thanks for having the debate tonight. I think it's good. It's valuable for the people here and the people who are watching on live stream and on Channel 9. Again, I'm Mark Myles. I'm running for district attorney. I told you I'm running to advocate for justice, for fairness, and for accountability in the district attorney's office. It's vitally important that we do all of those things, and there's different ways to get there. I talked a little bit about racial justice. I think that's important. I think somebody, for one, and I'll say it, there's never been a black district attorney in the state of Oklahoma. There's very few black assistant district attorneys in the state of Oklahoma. There's just a very, very small pool. I think I'm a little bit more sensitive to some of those issues by virtue of that. There's a thing called implicit bias, and if you look around the state at all the different offices around the state, that implicit bias is there, and I've seen it because I've practiced all over the state and in federal court, and you see what happens in different counties around the state. That's a challenge. I would like to bring a little bit more of an awareness of that culture to the office of the district attorney in Oklahoma County. When you talk about justice, I said it, we're talking about public safety, that's one thing. When you talk about fairness, it's important to treat everybody fairly and ethically. It's vitally important. And if you don't do that, then people lose faith in the office of the district attorney. We've got to have faith in institutions, and we live in a time where people have lost faith in institutions, in large part because of some of the people that have been elected over the years. And I'm not necessarily talking about just here, I'm talking about in other places. We've got to work really hard to fix that problem. I'm committed to fixing that problem. I want to hold the office to the highest ethical standards. I want to have a good relationship with law enforcement. I want to hold law enforcement to the highest ethical standards and make sure that we're doing everything and we're doing it right. And I am asking for your support on June 28th, and thank you again for having us tonight.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Behenna, 2 minutes to close to you.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here and giving us the opportunity to have this debate, and thank you to the voters who are here who are listening to these debates. I believe that we are at a critical point in our state's history and our nation's history. I think many people have lost faith in the criminal justice system. I think people believe that the criminal justice system is target-based as opposed to evidence-based. I believe our criminal justice system must operate with integrity and fairness for everybody. It doesn't matter where they live, the color of their skin, or what we believe their background is. As I've said many times during this debate, facts matter. Prosecutors should be driven by facts and evidence, not for retaliation or not just because we suppose somebody did something wrong. I was a federal prosecutor for 25 years. I know this job. I know how to use the weight of the prosecutor's office when making charging decisions. I know how to make sentencing recommendations based upon the individual sitting across the table from me and what their background and experience is. I've been a criminal defense lawyer. I see how addiction, substance abuse, mental health, and childhood trauma can lead somebody into the criminal justice system. I've done post-conviction work. I understand the mistakes that can happen during prosecutions. I've had a family member go through the criminal justice system, and my family has actually been the victims of violent crime, with my husband getting shot in the line of duty. I have moved through the criminal justice system in Oklahoma, not because I was padding a resume or for political gain, but because my heart moved me to these new challenges to try to do something better, to try to make a difference. I want to be your next district attorney because I want to make a difference. I want you to have trust in the system, and I want you to know that there's somebody sitting at that head office who understands the power of that office and uses that appropriately.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to both of you for having this conversation. Public debates matter. Thank you to News 9, all our media partners who've shared this. Thank you to everybody who came here, our sponsors. We have 2 weeks until Election Day, June 28th. We have 3 more debate nights. Tomorrow night at OCCC in Southwest Oklahoma City, we have the 2 Republican candidates for Attorney General. On June 22nd, we'll be in Bartlesville for the 2nd Congressional District Republican primary. And lastly, June 22nd, we'll have a GOP State Superintendent debate at the Waterford in Oklahoma City. I want to go home like all you do. Thank you very much.